Welcome to the third, I think it's the third time of the Zerynth Continuous Learning. This time is my turn, and I will present you this presentation about TLS. The title itself is taken from a movie by Woody Allen, which was Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, but Were Afraid to Ask. I suggest you to watch the movie. I chose the title because security and TLS in general are always scary stuff for programmers, and as sex was for Woody Allen. So I mean, there is some humor in the slides and some reference to the movie. I hope you, at least the not so young among you, will appreciate the effort. So the presentation is divided into many parts because we start from the basics, so from the cryptography, and we work our way up to the end of the presentation, where we will follow byte by byte, or more or less byte by byte, what happens during a TLS connection to a server. And we will simulate it with a Zerynth device here on my desk and a TLS server on my laptop. So why cryptography? Cryptography is a very wide field in computer science. There are a lot of things under cryptography: encryption, digital signatures, hash functions. We will see them in the next steps. And but I chose to let's say give you first a brief introduction of what we want to do with cryptography, as opposed to explain you every single algorithm that we are going to encounter. Because you can do a lot of different things with cryptography. Usually, they are applied to messages and to communications, to exchange of messages. And cryptography is applied to guarantee some properties of the communication or of the messages. So you have to think about cryptography primitives as building blocks to obtain properties of a system of communication or of a stream of bytes over a channel on the internet or whatever. The properties that we are going to see in the next few slides are this one: privacy, integrity, authenticity, and authentication. And I'm starting from the third slide to stress the difference between authenticity and authentication. We will see a lot of different slides, a lot of different examples. Well, I hope these come to your attention. I mean, the main takeaway of this presentation is not how TLS work, but what is the difference between authenticity and authentication. How do you perform cryptography? Usually, you have something that is called an encryption scheme, okay, a method, an algorithm that converts your message or your sequence of message to another type of message, which is called ciphertext, because it's the output of some cryptography algorithm. And your goal with cryptography is to make it in such a way that if someone gets the ciphertext, he has no information on the original message. This is the only definition of cryptography. The corollary of this is that the algorithms are not secret. Everything in cryptography is public. If you are approached by a vendor that tells you, "Oh, I'm selling you a new secret algorithm about security," don't buy it. Okay, cryptography is as strong as the algorithm is public. Everybody must know how it works because for two reasons: because the secrecy of because the efficiency of the cryptography should only be in the mathematical properties of the problem and not on the implementation. Okay, And second, because if the algorithm is known, it's open source, and so there are a lot of people that can double check, triple check, etc. Not only the code, but also the logic of the cryptography implementation. Okay, so everything must be public except for a couple of materials here and there that are the secrets used by cryptography. What is the general idea of cryptography? You have problems in cryptography that are very special. They are very, very easy to verify. Okay, if I give you the solution to the problem, you can say, okay, this solution is valid. But if I give you only the problem, finding a solution is extremely hard. Okay, I mean, anytime I'm not clear enough, stop me. So there are problems that are easy to verify and difficult to solve. This is the basic of every cryptography primitives that we are going to see in the next slide, and it is the basic of any cryptography implementation, any cryptography theory. This stems from a computer science theory, which is called complexity theory. I'm telling this for the non-computer scientists among you, that divides, tries to classify problems in terms of how difficult they are to solve. And the definition of difficulty is on the time it takes to solve the problem. Time is not the correct variable, it's the steps. Okay, you can have a supercomputer that is faster than my laptop, but they take the same number of steps to solve the problem. What are the main classes of problems? There are P problems, which are also known as polynomial problems. For example, sorting an array. Okay, if you have n elements on an array, we know that you can solve it in n squared steps. We also know that the best you can do is that you can solve it in n multiplied by logarithm of n steps. Okay, you can, and there is a proof that you cannot do better than that. But as you can see, the number of steps is proportional, is linear. Okay, with the number of items. So if you have 100 items in the array, you take 1,000 steps. But if you have 1 million items on the array, you take linearly 1 million. You take 10 millions or 100 millions of steps, or even 1 billion. But it's always a linear function. The NP problems are the hard one. Okay, are the difficult one. In these problems, if you add one item to the sides of the input of your problem, it goes exponential. Okay, if I have 10 elements, it takes 10 to the power of n. It takes n to the power of 10. If I have 1 million items, it is unsolvable. The number of possibilities of steps is bigger than the atoms in the universe. So these are untractable problems, but they are very suitable for cryptography because a subclass of them, it's easy to verify. Okay, if I give you a solution to an NP problem, you can say, okay, this is the solution in a few steps. This is classical computer science, and for the curious among you, we are still trying to, we computer scientists, we are still trying to determine if the P class is the same or not of the NP class. Okay, we don't know if these hard problems can be solved with a very, 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 very smart algorithm in a linear amount of steps. We don't know. We doubt that this is the case. We strongly suppose and believe that P problems are different from NP problems, but we don't know yet. To make things even more complex, we have since 20 or 30 years another class of problems, which is the bounded error quantum problems, that are a special class of problems that can be solved linearly only with a quantum computer. For the one among you that are thinking, why is he talking about quantum computer? I have a link here that, if you want, I can also open. That is a service on AWS that gives you a TLS server with post-quantum cryptography, using an algorithm for cryptography that is that should not be in the BQP class. Okay, why? Because quantum computer can apparently solve some hard problems in a linear fashion. So if you use a cryptography primitive that uses an NP problem that is solvable by quantum computing, you have a problem. Your credit card may use such algorithm. If in 10 years Google or IBM or whatever come out with a quantum computer, all your secret keys or your credit cards are skewed. Okay, they can solve the hard problem that is at the base of every cryptography today. So this is an important thing, and this is even more important because big companies like AWS or Google are starting to offer services with post-quantum cryptography, meaning with algorithms that should be safe, that should be not broken by a quantum computer. Which are the problems in cryptography today? And the one that we are going to see are the one-way functions, the prime factorization, and the discrete logarithm. These are the three main problems that are NP and that are used by most of the cryptography primitives. So let's see the properties of that we want. Privacy. Privacy is okay. The slides and all the subsequent slides are like this. There is Bob and Alice. For the ones that are not computer scientists, we like to have these two people, Bob and Alice, talk together, and some enemy, some hacker that we in the slide identify with black hat, want to steal their information and try to do something bad with the message that they exchange. Everything inside the dashed boxes is safe. Okay, if something is in a dashed box, is private to Bob or to Alice. Everything else can be accessed by black hat, and he can do whatever he wants. So Bob and Alice try to exchange a message. The message is M. Black hat reads the message. They don't want this to happen, so they want privacy in their communication. So they apply a cryptography primitive, an encryption primitive, with a key that is known only by Bob and only by Alice. And Bob tries to encrypt the message M, obtains a ciphertext C. It sends it to Alice, and Alice decrypts the message. The poor black hat stands there and doesn't know what C stands for because it doesn't know the key, and it can't also produce any meaningful message. Okay, it cannot say, okay, I want to write a message to Alice, and the message is X. Let me try to send it to Alice. It cannot, because he doesn't know the key. So the property of privacy is that whatever black hat gets cannot be read. Okay, the original information cannot be retrieved by black hat. Obviously, this is a simplification, okay, because black hat can do whatever. It can also change the atoms or the physical reality in his favor to obtain these messages. So this is just a simplification of this property. The other property is integrity. Because if black hat stands in the middle of the communication between Bob and Alice, he can take the message coming from Bob and send another message to Alice. And there is no way for Alice to know if the message has been changed during the communication. Okay. So another property that we want in cryptography and in security is that there must be a way for Alice to know if the message has been changed or not. And this thing is done with another set of primitives, usually hash functions. What happens is that Bob sends the message together with the hash of the message. Alice received both things and can check easily that the hash of the message corresponds to the one that has been sent by Bob. So she's sure that the message has not been changed. Why is this? Because, as we saw, the problem of finding the hash, two hashes that amount to the same message is a difficult problem. We will see the details later. And Black Hat cannot change the message without changing also the hash and allowing Alice to know that something has gone wrong in the communication. He cannot because mathematics of cryptography does not allow him to do such calculation in a short enough time to be effective. Another this slide is not, let's say, we will see integrity in details later, but there is a lot of way in which Black Hat can do strange things to the messages. Okay, it can also take the place of Bob and send a message that Bob was sending the day before, and there is no way for Alice to know that actually Black Hat is using the message instead of Bob. But this is another set of problems that we will solve later. Another property that we want to obtain with cryptography is authenticity. Okay, authenticity is a property of the message, not of the communication. Okay, it's the property that a message can be proved to be created only by a specific entity. In this case, we want a way, an algorithm for Bob to create a message and for everyone else to say, okay, this message can only be created by Bob. This is different from saying that this message has been sent by Bob. Okay, one thing is creation, one thing is communication. So authenticity is about messages, is about the integrity of a message, because authenticity implies integrity. If a message is authentic, it is also not tampered. But it's a property of not of Bob, but of the message created by Bob. What do we use here? We use another cryptography primitive. It is called MAC, which stands for Message Authentication Codes. Obviously, the terminology is a mess in cryptography. One of the reason why cryptography is hard is that the terminology is very ambiguous most of the time for the non-expert. For example, MAC stands for Message Authentication Code, when actually is a Message Authenticity Code. Okay. But that's the name that it took, and it's still there. How it works? There is a key shared between Bob and Alice, and Bob generates a function that is dependent on the message and the key, and sends it together with the message to Alice. Since only Bob and Alice know the key, this amounts to have an authentic message. Okay, Black Hat cannot generate a message that is authentic because it doesn't know the key. What can Black Hat do? Black Hat can read the message. Okay, the message is not encrypted. There is no privacy here. There is only authenticity. I'm sending a message. I'm sending some function together with the message that will allow Alice to verify that the message is authentic. And she can do this calculation because she knows the key. Black Hat cannot. Again, why authenticity is not authentication? Because in this scenario here, okay, this slide, click it away. In this scenario here, Black Hat see the authentic message passing on the internet, and he can reuse it. Okay, there is nothing preventing Black Hat to take the place of Bob and sending the same message again to Alice. Okay, the message is authentic, but the communication is not authenticated because the poor Alice think that Bob is talking to her, but it's Black Hat talking to her with messages that Bob generated. Okay, is this clear enough? I take silence for a yes. Okay. What is authentication? Authentication is a property of the communication. Okay, it entails authenticity because all the messages exchanged in an authentication procedure are also authentic. But it's a property of the communication. Okay, in this diagram, you see that before creating an authentic message, Alice asks Bob to prove its knowledge of the secret key, okay, because she sends a number to Bob. Bob do some cryptographic stuff, taking the message and calculating a function that depends on the number and on the secret key, and send it back to Alice. Alice now knows that the message is authentic and that only Bob can have sent the message to her because it contains the number that she challenged Bob with. Okay, so this is different from authenticity. This is a property of the communication, and there is how to say, aliveness property. Bob should be there while Alice is talking to him. Okay, Black Hat cannot do anything. Okay, because it doesn't know the key, and it cannot reuse previous messages because each communication starts with a different number, and this prevents Black Hat to take the place of Bob. Okay. Because if you put the poor Black Hat in the place of Bob, you see that it cannot generate anything, because when Alice asks a proof of authenticity with number G, the poor Black Hat cannot calculate a function depending on G and on the private key, because he only saw messages with the number N passing on the internet. So it cannot do anything. Authentication is different from authenticity. So if you are still alive, I go on with crypto primitives. We are going to see the tool of the trade. Okay, what is needed to do the job of cryptography from the building blocks to the most famous algorithm and most used algorithm in cryptography. And once we finish this, we will be able to tackle a bigger problem that is how do you use all these primitives to actually obtain the properties that we just sketched so far. Let's start with hash functions, actually secure hash function or cryptographically secure hash functions, whatever. They have a lot of names. What are hash functions? They are cryptographic primitives that map whatever input as a sequence of bytes to a fixed length output. This means that if you take a picture of a cat and you pass it into a cryptographic hash function, you obtain, for example, 32 bytes. Okay, so you lose a lot of information in this cryptography primitive. They have additional properties. Okay, they are deterministic. Every time you put the same cut into the function, you obtain the same output. There is no way of obtaining different outputs from the same input. They are extremely fast. They usually are implemented also in hardware. There is whatever is the input is easy and fast and linear to calculate the output. There is a property that is called avalanche effect, effetto valanga. This means that if you change a pixel on the cat, you obtain a completely different result. Completely different, almost random. The two inputs are very similar, but the output is completely different. Another property of the hash functions is that if I give you the output, there is no way for you to know what was the input. You cannot construct the cat from the 32 bytes. There is no way. This is called pre-image resistance. If I give you the output, you cannot know the inputs. Then there is the second pre-image resistance. If I give you the cat and the output, you cannot find another input that gives the same output. Okay, this is a stronger property. If I give you the output, you can't do nothing. But I want to help you because I pity you. You're a poor black cat and you cannot do anything because cryptography is strong. I want to give you the output and the cat. Find me another cat or another dog or another input or whatever that goes to the same output. You can't. It's still a difficult problem. This feature of having two inputs that map to the same output is called collision. And it's an obvious property, okay? You are mapping an infinite number of inputs to a finite number of outputs. They are 32 bytes. They are a lot of outputs, but they are finite. On the other hand, you have an infinite. So for obvious reason, there will be two cats that will go into the same output. But it's difficult to find these two cats, okay? What do you use secure hashes for? For a lot of things. They are everywhere. They are the functions that are used for integrity verification. Why? Because of the avalanche effect. If I have a message and the message is this cat, if you send me the cat and the output, I can verify that the cat is the right one that you wanted to send me. Because if a bit is lost during the communication, I detect it immediately because the hash that I calculate from the cat missing a bit is different from the one you send me together with the cat. Okay, so it's the most straightforward way to do the integration, the integrity check. We also use this stuff for digital signature because we will see in the next slide, but usually digital signature are expensive algorithms. So you don't want to digital sign the cat, but you want to digital sign the hash of the cat because it's shorter, because it's 32 bytes, okay? It's used for password verification and storage, and we will see an example in the next slide. It is used for unique identifiers because there are so many, there are 32 bytes of possibilities. So usually you can safely assume that by hashing random data, you will not get you will not get a collision. You will not get the same output. Okay, so you can use an hash as a unique identifier. For example, in Bitcoin or Ethereum network, the address of your Ethereum address or your Bitcoin address is the hash of the public key that is used for cryptography, and it is assumed to be unique. Okay, even if there is a very, very, very small probability that two public key will map to the same hash, but it is so small that you don't care. And obviously, for proof of work in blockchains, in various blockchains that support the algorithm. How many secure hash functions are there? A lot. Only a subset of them is actually standard. Okay, there is an organization, the NIST, the NIST, which publish the security standards and updates the security standards. Okay, and it updates them based on vulnerability that are found, or based on the computational power of the attackers, okay, of Black Hat. As computers get faster, you need to update the size of the problem, of the cryptographic problem that you are going to address. If you notice the years of publication, you see that SHA-1 and SHA-2 were published in the beginning of 2000, and then we had a rapid update of SHA-2 in 2012 by increasing the size of the output, and then 3 years after they introduced another set of algorithms, which was more and more which we think is more secure and more safe for application. So this is a race against the attackers. Security is a nice field, is a challenging field because it's like being in a war where you win with mathematics. Okay, so if someone finds a way to break your SHA-2 algorithm, you have to use the next safe one, waiting until the attacker will break it, and you will need the SHA-4 and SHA-5 and whatever. These are the secure one. These are the approved and standard one, and they are different in terms of how they are calculated, but also on how big is the output. Okay. Usually the number that you see after the SHA is the number of bits of the output. So you have 224, 256, 385, 384, 512. Okay. Always the bigger the better, because the problem becomes more difficult. There are, however, other hash functions. For example, the last one in the table is the KEKAK 256, which is a version of the SHA-3 that was not accepted as a standard, and it is the one that is used in the blockchains. Okay, that has all the properties of the hash function. So it's secure, it's fast, it's deterministic, pre-image, second pre-image, and whatever, but it's not a standard. Okay. This table is here to show you that the avalanche effect. Okay, if you hash Zerynth with MD5, SHA-1, SHA-224, 256, and whatever, you obtain this result. If you add an exclamation mark, the results are completely different. Okay, they are completely random. One of them starts with the same number, but it's just a normal probability. But they are completely different, and it's just 1 byte of difference. Just an example of hash functions that are used, that I hope are used everywhere when a website proposes us to sign up or sign in to it, and usually it goes like this. During the sign up phase, you send your password in an encrypted channel. The server takes your password, adds it to a string that we call salt, and obtain a hash, okay, called p-hash. In the database of the server, you will find only the p-hash, not the password, okay, because it is not safe to store the password. If the database goes, if someone reads the database, it can get the password of the users, but if in the database you have the hash of the password, you cannot retrieve the password, because they are one-way functions, and you cannot, from the output, go back to the input. When you log in again to the site, the website, you send your password again. The server takes the password, adds the salt, calculates the p-hash, and if the p-hash is in the database, you are logged in. If it is not, you are not logged in. This is the right way to do password storage. Okay, everywhere where it is done correctly, it is done like this. It is not acceptable to store password in the clear, or password encrypted with a key that is in the server. Okay, the server must have no way to know your password unless by verifying that you sent the correct password. Okay, this is the same scheme like before between Bob and Alice. Bob sent a message, and Alice verified that the message is the one that she saw before because she calculates the hash of it. Why do we have the salt on step 2 in each one of the phases? We have because nothing prevents the black hat to compile a huge list of pre-calculated hashes. Okay, it can take the password, the most common passwords used by security unaware users, and calculate the hashes and just see if they are in the database of the server. Okay, and these are called rainbow attacks. If I take the password or all the 6 number combinations and I hash them, I can know from the output, comparing the output that I get with the one on the database of the server, if the password was that one or not, with a very high probability. So we add the salt to avoid this kind of attack. We want the hash of the same password to be different between the users and between the normal password without the salt. This adds higher difficulty in trying to steal password from databases. I want to give you a remark about this. We are the black hat, the hacker, is not cracking the algorithm of the hash. Okay, it's just using it in a smart way to deduce a password, but is not breaking the problem. So this the need for the salt is not derived from some missing feature of the secure hash function, but is coming from a smart way of using them to deduce information. Okay, and this is another reason why security is a fun field and a challenging field, because there are a lot of smart way to use algorithms in a way that one was not aware when he was designing the algorithm itself. Let's go, unless there are questions, to symmetric key cryptography. This is another primitive of cryptography, and it's a way to add. Usually, the main usage of symmetric key cryptography is for obtaining privacy. Okay, while secure hashes were there to obtain integrity and authenticity, symmetric key cryptography is mostly used for privacy. How it is implemented? You have a secret key that is shared between the parties that want to communicate. So Alice has a key and Bob has the same key. 99% of the symmetric key cryptography algorithms are block ciphers. It means that they divide the message into blocks of fixed length, and they apply the encryption and decryption functions on these blocks. The most used and the most famous of this algorithm is the AES, which is the Advanced Decryption Standard, and it has a 128-bit block. This means that if you want to send 1 megabyte, it divides the 1 megabyte into 128-bit blocks, and it applies encryption to each one of them. And the encryption is, let's say, primed or configured by the secret key, which can be of different lengths, 3 different lengths, from 128 to 256 bits. There is another aspect of symmetric key, which is the mode of operation, but let me skip it for the moment. We will see in the next slides. I want to remark and to address the pros and cons of symmetric key cryptography. The pros is that it's extremely fast. It was designed to be accelerated by hardware. It works by putting together S boxes and P boxes, where S stands for substitution and P stands for permutation. Basically, you send your blocks into the encryption or decryption phase, and when it goes into the substitution box, some bits are changed, and when you go through the permutation box, some bits change places. Okay, you obtain a permutation of the input. If you do this a lot of times, and if you add dependency between the key and the message and whatever, you obtain a symmetric key cryptography algorithm, which is difficult to invert, to obtain the message or the plain text from the ciphertext if you don't know the secret key. From the cons side, the secret keys are the problem, because you need to distribute them. If I want to talk secretly with Matteo, we need to have I need to have a key, and Matteo need to have the same key, and these two keys are and this key is only used between the two of us. It's the one that I use to communicate with Matteo, that Matteo used to communicate with me. But if I want to communicate with Andrea, I need another key that only me and Andrea share. So you see that if you want to use this kind of cryptography to obtain privacy, you have to manage a lot of keys. Okay, think about the modern web. If we only have symmetric key cryptography and I want to connect to www.google.com, there must be a key that Google shares with me, okay? And so Google should handle something like billions and billions of keys, one for each different user of its platform, okay? And or for each connection. And this is not doable. So there is a key distribution problem. The other property, the property 2 is missing. I don't know why. There are property 1 and 3. It's the absence of the non-repudiability properties. What does it mean in a few words? It means that if we find a message that was encrypted with the key that I used to communicate with Matteo, there is no way to prove if I or Matteo created the message, because both of us know the same key that is needed to create a message. So there is no way to mathematically prove that I was the one that created the message or that Matteo was the one to create the message. So there is no way to repudiate that message. You say, no, that message is not mine. Okay? And this is a property of symmetric key cryptography which is solved by asymmetric key cryptography. One last word on mode of operation. If you encrypt, you can encrypt with symmetric key in many different ways. You can take the first block, M1, pass it through the encryption function and obtain the ciphertext. Then take the second block and put it to the encryption function and obtain C2. This is called ACB mode, electronic code book. This is an unsecure way of doing things, and I'll show you why. Another way of doing this is to mix the blocks in such a way that, for example, cipher text number 2 is dependent not only on the key and on the block FK, but it is also dependent on the previous application of cryptography to the block. Okay, so C3 now depends on C2 and C1. C4 will depend on C3, C2, and C1. So you are spreading the information that is contained in one single block to every other block that you're going to encrypt. Why I'm telling this? Check this example. There is a penguin image. The middle one is encrypted with AES with ACB mode, but we can still see that it's a penguin. Okay, I mean, it's a penguin. It's a grayscale penguin. It's a little blurred on the edge, but it's a penguin. This happens because there is not because each block in ACB is encrypted separately from each other. So if the background is white, each white pixel will be the same ciphertext. You are not hiding information enough with this approach. The image on the right is the I think a CBC approach, and it seems to be noise. Okay, it seems to be random. You sure cannot tell me that that is a penguin. Okay, why I'm telling this? Because you may have heard that during the lockdowns for the COVID-19, Zoom platform was gaining a lot of popularity because it was allowing millions and millions of people to chat when they were keep working while they were in lockdown. But you may have also heard that they had a lot of security problems, and the problem was this: they were encrypting sound and video with an AES ECB mode. So practically, the video was not encrypted and the sound was not encrypted, because it was very easy to not get every single detail of the video. But I mean, you can still tell that that was a penguin or that was Matteo using Zoom. Okay, and for sure you were able to listen to the conversation. Now, why this has happened, I don't know, but this is a huge security hole. Okay, this is a newbie error. Okay, no one with a security background would ever use ACB mode for transmitting a stream of video and sound, because it's not the way to do it. This is not advanced cryptography. Okay, this is very, very basic cryptography that I'm presenting to you, and that was that bug, that security hole, gained the news because it was astonishingly basic for someone doing video streaming. Okay, there are other ways to do this stuff, to chain the message together. Let's not go into these details. The only thing that I want to point out is that IV part at the beginning, at the beginning of the encryption, IV stands for initialization vector, and it is random data that is used as the first input to the encryption algorithm when you want to chain things together. And as you can see, it is sent without encryption to the other party. If there are no questions on this, or if you are still alive, I don't see your faces. So let's go on with asymmetric cryptography. So what happens in asymmetric cryptography? You don't have a single key, but you have two keys. One is public and one is private. You can do a key generation algorithm and obtain these keys. You will keep your private key for yourself in your secure zone, in your safe zone, where nobody can find it. But you can give your public key to everyone, to Alice, to Mark, or to Black Hat. There is no problem. You can give it to everyone, because the mathematics behind this kind of cryptography allows you to do so, because it's not possible to derive the private key from the public key in a decent amount of time. What you can do with asymmetric keys? You can do two things. First, you can do encryptions, and it works like this. Marx wants to send a message to Bob, and to do so, it will take the message, encrypt the message with the public key of Bob. Okay, send the ciphertext to Bob, and since Bob has the corresponding private key, you will be able to decrypt the message. Only Bob will be able to decrypt the message, because only Bob has the private key. The poor Black Hat that stands there listening to all the communication can only get the BPub, the ciphertext encrypted with the public key, but cannot open it. But what can it do? It can generate another message for Bob, okay? Because he has also the public key, so he can also speak to Bob and send message that only Bob can open. Okay, using asymmetric keys like this allows for encryption, so allows for the property that we saw at the beginning, which is privacy. But with asymmetric key, I can do another stuff. I can do authenticity. Okay, still not authentication. I can do authenticity. What this amount to? Let's say that, as usual, Bob has its own private key. It wants to send a message to Alice, and he wants to have this property. He wants to, for Alice to be able to prove that the message is coming from Bob, has been created from Bob. Only Bob could have created that message that Alice received. How does it work? Bob takes a message, encrypts it with the private key, sends this thing to Alice. Alice decrypts the message with the public key of Bob, and obviously obtain the message. But since she was able to decrypt the message, it means that that message can only be created by Bob. He is the only one to have the private key. What happens in this communication? Happens that Black Hat can read the message. Okay, this is not privacy, because Black Hat has a public key. He can decrypt the ciphertext and obtain the original message. What cannot do Black Hat? Black Hat cannot create a message that only Bob can create, because it does not know the private key. It cannot generate a message X, send it to Alice, and hope that Alice will prove that she received the message from Bob, because it doesn't know the private key. These are the two ways of using asymmetric key. One is for encryption and one is for authenticity. It depends on which key you use for the first operation. Let's see a couple of algorithms. The first one in asymmetric is the RSA, which stands for Rives, Adleman, and Shamir. Rives, Shamir, and Adleman, which for the not computer science between you are actually gods of computer science. Okay, they invented probably half of the cryptography that we use today. They come up with a lot of the most well-known algorithms that we still use, so that they are very important people. What is the problem at the base of this algorithm? It is prime factorization, meaning that if I give you a number, you have to find me the prime numbers that multiplied together give that number. For example, if I give you 15, you can immediately say that 15 is 3 multiplied by 5. 3 is prime, 5 is prime. You have performed a prime factorization. That if you say that if you use 15 is easy, but these algorithms use very big number. Okay, today the minimum number of bits for the numbers that you have to do the calculations with, it is 2048, which amount to 600 digits, and that's a number with 600 digits. If you want to be very safe, you have to ask for a 496 bits length of the number for the calculations, which is more than 1000 digits. Okay. Applying the prime factorization to these kind of numbers is difficult because they are very, 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 very long, and the complexity of the problem depends on the bits of the number of bits on the key. Okay, so the problem is exponential in 2048 bits or exponential in 496 bits. What is the problem with this algorithm, and in general with all the algorithms in the asymmetric cryptography, is the fact that they are slow. They are too slow. They are difficult to accelerate with the hardware, okay, and because they require a lot of very big registers for storing the numbers, and they are also so slow that you cannot use them in a very good way for privacy. Okay, we will see that in the TLS that the asymmetric cryptography is used for authenticity, authentication, digital signatures, and whatever, but then the communication is encrypted with symmetric key algorithms. We will see this in a few. Another algorithm is the elliptic curve cryptography, which is where the hard problem is the discrete logarithm, meaning that if you take an elliptic curve that is just an equation, okay, with integer solutions. The equation at step number 5. Okay, it's quite an easy equation, but it is not executed. The solution is not searched in the real space, but in the integer space. Actually, in a group space, which is a mathematical abstraction for modulus operation. So I don't want you to grasp how an elliptic curve works. I want just to point out a couple of things. First, that the numbers involved in this calculation are shorter than RSA. Okay, the most secure elliptic curve cryptography used in widespread use today on the internet uses 256 bits. Okay, so it's not that big, but is very secure. Okay, because 256 bits of ACC amounts to 3,000 bits of RSA. Okay, so this algorithm is safer and more secure, even with a smaller number of bits. What is the problem? The problem in this algorithm is that you can take a number, let's call it in step 6, for example, which is called D, and which is your private key. It's a random number. So the generation of a private key in the ACC scheme is just generate a big random number of 256 bits. If you multiply this number for a point in the curve, and we don't care how it is done, but you can see that the point is a parameter of the curve, is this thing over here. Okay, it's quite a big number, two big numbers because we are in 2 dimensions. If you multiply this number by your private key here, you obtain a number which is your public key. Doing this stuff in this direction is easy, but calculating D from Q is hard. If I give you Q and I give you G, because you know G, you cannot find D. Okay, this is why this problem is NP. It's easy to verify that Q is a public key, but you cannot find the input, which is D, if I give you the output, which is Q. Okay, this is how it works. Why I am introducing this? For many reasons. First, because we are doing IoT, and these calculations are faster than the RSA. The keys are shorter than the RSA, and the security is higher than the RSA with 2048 bits. So this is the algorithm that we use, for example, in the Zerynth Device Manager or in every TLS connection that we perform to our IoT servers. We are not the only one. Also, AWS has the same kind of cryptography for their IoT stuff. Next primitive, we'll go faster now. It's the HMAC, which stands for Hash-Based Message Authentication Code. What is this primitive for? Integrity and authenticity. I want to generate something from a message that gives Alice the proof that I created that message and only I did it. Okay, so I take a message, I append the secret key that I and Alice know to the message. I mix them together in different ways, depends on the algorithm, and then I take the hash of that message plus the key. That hash can be verified only by someone that knows the key, so by Alice, and cannot be forged or tampered with by Black Hat. Why I'm putting it here? Because the algorithm HS256, which stands for, I don't remember, hash-based something, hash-based symmetric something, is an hash-based message authentication code that we use in the Zerynth Device Manager for credentials. We will see this later, but please keep this in mind. And not only us, but a lot of websites use these algorithms for example, JWT tokens. We will see these also these in the next slides. These kind of algorithms, HMACs, are very common and used in a lot of places for, again, integrity and authenticity. I don't want you to understand how they are done because there are a lot of dates that are not important for the presentation. Next primitive, the digital signature. What is a digital signature? It is a MAC for asymmetric cryptography. It gets the same result. It gets the same property, which is integrity and, again, authenticity of the message. But when using private and public keys. How do you do it? You take a message, which could be whatever, also the cat that we saw in the slides before. You calculate the hash of the message, and you sign the hash of the message with a private key. Okay. Then I send to Matteo the message plus the signature. And since Matteo knows my public key, because it's public, he can do the reverse calculation. He receives the message plus the signature. He calculates the hash of the message. It verifies that signature corresponds to my public key, and if the correspondence is okay, he has the proof that I have created the message, so that message is not tampered and it is authentic. Okay. These bytes here in red are actually a digital signature. So this stuff in black is the hash of the message, and these two numbers here are the public key in an ACC algorithm. Okay, just for you to know what is the aspect, what is what a digital signature is like. Why I am introducing digital signatures? Because they are used everywhere. Of all the digital signature algorithms, because there are a lot of them, I want to highlight the ACDSA.
Giacomo,
Dimmi.
A question, simple question. But the red and black chart from the slide, yeah, it's always combined that way in a message with a digital signature, or maybe the red one can be Michelin in other.
There are about 20 slides later about the formats of these things.
Okay.
But let's say that there is a standard way to express cryptographical primitives in a way that everyone can use them without error. Okay. Obviously,
because is this the problem? Yeah.
This actually, since you asked the question, this is not a standard way. This is the digital signature of a blockchain transaction. Okay, and blockchain transaction does not. It is not the same standard of TLS. Okay, so it's just custom. But you can notice that there is this A0 and A0 here, okay, because this is the header that says, okay, this is a number and this is another number. But it's just This is a custom format. There is a standard format that we will see later. So why I want to introduce ACDSA, which stands for Elliptic Curve Digital Signature Algorithm? Because this is used everywhere, and there are funny stories about it. So how do you perform a CDSA? You take a message, you calculate the hash of the message, you generate a random number, okay? Bear in mind this step. You generate a random number. You calculate a point in the curve by multiplying the random number to the G point of the curve, okay? As we saw before in the slide. And you obtain two numbers, okay? The two numbers that are here, okay? The one red number and the other red number. These two numbers are calculated like in steps 6 and 7. Don't care about the formula. The only thing that you have to care is that the S number depends on the P key, on the private key, okay? So you have a signature which is made by two numbers, R and S, and that if you have my public key, you can verify that I actually that only I could have generated those number R and those number S starting from my private key. So basically, you receive the message and two numbers, and then you do the inverse calculation. Why I'm telling you this? Because one important point of the ACDSA is that you have to generate a random number. Because for the properties of the elliptic curves, that I don't want you to learn, or I don't want to give you details, but there is a property that if you have two signatures and you know that the random number used in those two signatures is the same, you can calculate the private key. Okay, so this is a powerful property. If you are not using a good enough random number, or if you're using the same number, I get two signatures for you, and I find your private key. Okay, not just some information for forging some message. Your private key. I become you. Okay. Why I'm telling you this? Because this has happened. Okay. Sony PlayStation 3 had a CDSA algorithm for checking, I don't remember if the firmware or whatever of the PlayStation, it was controlling a feature to avoid piracy, okay, to only use signed images from Sony. But a developer in Sony, which probably was not aware of the CDSA, or probably put a big to-do in the code and forgot to fix it, that didn't use a random number. It used the number 4. Okay, so every Sony PlayStation 3 in the world has been signed with the same random number. A group of hackers, I don't know how, but noticed this and got the private key of Sony for signing the PlayStation 3 games. And so they were able to crack the protection in 1 second. Okay, this was worse than the Zoom thing. Okay, because this is violating an assumption of the algorithm. While Zoom was using a very bad security algorithm, Sony was violating the prescription of the algorithm. You always have to use a random number when you sign something. There is a way, and it is called deterministic ACDSA, where you don't have to generate a random number, but you can derive a number from the message. This is secure. We use it in Zerynth. If you go into the standard library, you see that there is the ACC module that allows for deterministic signatures. And why is there? Because not only you have to generate a random number, but you have to generate a secure random number from a true source of randomness. Usually, random number in microcontrollers are generated by algorithms, so they are not random. They are pseudo-random. And if you know the algorithms, you know the entire sequence of random number. and so you can try them and see if you can derive my private key from my signature.
Even in hardware is a pseudo-random generator, because you can do a sort of chain of XOR port in hardware, and you can generate random number in registers, internal register of hardware in general, but it's not a real random number, because starting from a number, you get the same sequence of
exactly. But today's microcontrollers are shipping with true random numbers, and usually they use the ambient noise. For example, they use a pin, floating pin, and then from the value of the pin, they initialize a random number generator. Or, for example, the ESP32, this is important. If you go into the ESP32 documentation, you find that the random number generator of the ESP32 is a true random number generator only when you have the RF part initialized. You have to initialize Wi-Fi to obtain true random numbers, because probably they use the frequencies or the electromagnetic fields whatsoever to obtain true random numbers. However, if you want to have a certified hardware from the NIST or whatever, or another certification in security, you have to usually have a true source of randomness. In some application, deterministic signing is okay. You don't have to generate random numbers. You don't have hardware support, so you use deterministic sign. For example, blockchain transactions are usually deterministic. Last algorithm. Oh my God. Which is one probably of the most beautiful algorithm in cryptography, are key agreement algorithms. It's a set of algorithms that allows Alice and Bob to exchange a secret on an unsafe channel where Black Hat is listening, in such a way that Black Hat cannot get this common secret. It can, this is not really an algorithm. It's a general template that you can adapt for each different asymmetric algorithm. So you can find, and the name of the algorithm is the Diffie-Hellman algorithm. You can find the Diffie-Hellman algorithm with RSA, which is called DH, or with elliptic curves, which is called ECDH. You can use this algorithm with ephemeral keys, meaning that you use some secret material in the algorithm is just used once, and so you have DHE and ACDHE. You see that the acronyms gets crazy as you go on. But let's say one of the features of the algorithm is that not only you can get a common secret and Black Hat cannot, but you also gain the property of forward secrecy. What does it mean? Does it mean that if, for some reason, Black Hat spends a lot of computational power to find the common secret that Alice and Bob exchanged for this communication, he cannot decrypt all the future communications. Okay, this is a temporary secret, and if Alice and Bob apply the key agreement algorithm more than one time, they obtain a different secret. And so the poor Black Hat, even if he can crack one of the algorithm, he has no information to crack all the future applications of the algorithm. This is important, okay? Because I'm sure that if now I exchange a key with Matteo using the Diffie-Hellman algorithm, and someone stole it, the next time I exchange a key with Matteo, the key will be different, and that stolen key will be useless. Our future communication are protected by this algorithm. How does this algorithm works? So let's say that usually it is explained with the colors mixture, but let's say that Alice and Bob have some common material, okay, that is there before they start to communicate. In this case of elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman is just the curve, okay? They agree to use a curve. There are many different curves. They choose one, okay? And this is the yellow color. Then Alice generates a private key and a public key with the SEC curve. I tried to use the same color of the diagram. So the DA is the private key of Alice, and this is red, while QA is the public key of Alice, and it is this I don't know what is, orange, light orange, I don't know. On the other side, Bob generates a private key, which is somewhat green or aquamarine, or I don't know, and a public key, a corresponding public key, QB, that is the giant thing, that's a blue thing that Bob sends to Alice. When they receive their, let's say, public color, okay, they can mix it in a way that they obtain the same secret. For example, what they do is that Alice calculates her private key, DA, multiplied by the public key of Bob, and Bob calculates the private key of Bob multiplied by the public key of Alice. Those two numbers, by mysterious property of elliptic curves, are the same. So they have a shared secret, which is this number. This number cannot be calculated by Black Hat because he doesn't know DA and he doesn't know DB. He only knows QB and QA, but he cannot derive DA and DB from the public keys because this is an hard problem, unless he has a quantum computer. And we assume that he is not rich enough to have one yet. All the primitives that we saw until now, and we took 1 hour and a half, are used in the TLS. Okay, so it's not. I'm not here to be encyclopedic or to show how many algorithms are there. All the primitives that I presented to you will be used in a TLS handshake. But before we go to the TLS handshake, we have to solve a problem. Okay, and this problem is the fact that that asymmetric algorithm assume that everyone has access to public keys, okay, and that those public keys in some ways are trusted. So what we have to analyze is all the infrastructure that we are forced to put in place to use this algorithm correctly. Okay, you cannot just by applying the Diffie-Hellman or the RSA obtain all the properties that we want. We need to have what is called a PKI, a public key infrastructure. Usually the reaction to the public key infrastructure notions is this, okay? Because it's complex, it's made of a lot of formats, a lot of protocols, a lot of acronyms, a lot of things that require reference to other things, a lot of specification, extensions, versions, whatever. It's a mess. I'll try to go through this mess as simple as possible, but this is an important part also for the Zerynth Device Manager team, because it's everything in the slide is applied to what we do in the IoT. So what are the PKI goals? We want to be sure that the public keys that we use are trusted, and the meaning of trusted will be defined in the next slides. But as a simple introduction, as we see before, during a symmetric cryptography, you distribute your keys, but Black Hat can just put himself in the middle and change the keys, and there is no way for you to trust a public key that comes to you. I mean, if Matteo sent me the public keys he generated, I'm not that sure that I can trust the public key, because how can I trust that Andrea doesn't put some thing in the middle and got me a different public key so that they can listen to our conversation? I don't know. There must be a way to obtain this trust, and we see next. Not only this, but the trust usually goes from the digital world to the real world. So there must be a mechanism to digitally certify real world things. Okay, and this is something that we will see. And finally, the PKI uses cryptography to assign identities to entities. Okay, I mean, if I'm talking with the server managed by Matteo, I want a proof that I'm talking with that server. Okay, so I'm giving an identity to that server, and how to do it is a matter of understanding how the PKI works. And also I have to manage the lifecycle of entities, because maybe I don't want to trust the server of Matteo anymore, so I need a way to manage the lifecycle of these entities. So, first, an introduction. This is my medicine degree that I took in 2011, and there is a very, very, very strong relation between real-world certificates and digital certificates, okay? Because PKI is all about public keys and digital certificates. So, what you see in these certificates, first of all, the first line is a trusted authority, okay? There is more than one trusted authority. There is the Magnifico Rettore, Professor Marco Pasquale at the time, that was trusted, okay, because he was the head of the university. Then there is the university, which is an institution that gave Professor Marco Pasquale the power to issue this certificate to me. And there is the Repubblica Italiana, the Italian state, the Italian Republic, that gave the power to the University of Pisa to give the power to the Professor Marco Pasquale to issue a certificate of medicine to me. Okay, so the first thing that you saw here is who are the authority that allow me to trust this certificate. It's not that, I mean, why we trust it. It's a matter of, in this case, in the case of the real world, it's a matter of, how do you say, it's used, okay? You live in a state, so you trust the law of the state, and so you trust the Repubblica Italiana to give the power to the University of Pisa, and etc., down the chain of authority. There will be a way in the PKI to obtain the same result and prove the same result, okay? Another things in this certificate is the subject, okay? There is Giacomo Baldi there, and there is my birthplace and my birthday, okay? So there are information that identify me. This subject is issued by an authority to me, and I am the subject of the certificate. Not only that, but there is a section with a proof of the certificate, of the claims of the certificate. This is a medicine and surgery certificate. To get it, I had to follow the Statuto and Regolamento Didattico, to pass a lot of exam, okay, visti gli studi compiuti. Then I had to do a final thesis and a final test, so there is a result of the test. And only because I did this thing, and the University of Pisa, on behalf of the Republic of Italy, is certifying that I did this. She's proving that I did all of these. So if you ask the University of Pisa, they will give you probably the report of my exams and my final thesis. You can find it on the website. Those are the proofs that are embedded on these certificates. Without these proofs, I cannot you cannot get this certificate, okay? It is not free. You have to spend at least 6 years in the university, pay the taxes, pass the exams, and do the final test to obtain this. There is something that links this piece of paper to the real world. Then there are certificate constraints. I mean, this is not a certificate for handling a nuclear power plant. I'm not certified to do it. I can only do the things that are in the certificate, specifically medicine and surgery. Okay, there is actually it's more complex than this, but okay, let's say that there are certificate constraints. I cannot just with this certificate be a doctor. You also need another certificate that another institution gives you. But just for the sake of the analogy, let's imagine that you can do the doctor job with this certificate. Then there is a time validity. Okay, this certificate starts from the 12th of April 2011, not before. If by chance I did the medical profession before that date, I will be breaking the laws of the Italian Republic, because the Italian Republic allows me through the university, etc., to do this profession only from the 12th of April 2011. There is no end validity in this certificate, because this is just a knowledge certificate, but there could be an end validity in the other certificate I was talking to you about, if you do not, for example, pay the subscription to the medical guild. Also, there is a signature of the authority. Okay, not only the university and the Italian Republic gave the power to Professor Marco Pasquali, but Professor Marco Pasquali also had to sign this piece of paper. Okay, those are a lot of elements, and most of them, actually all of them, are also in digital certificates. Okay. But before we analyze a digital certificate, we have sadly to understand how they are written. Okay, there are millions of different formats. I'm just giving you the one that we will for sure encounter, and that you already have encountered, but you probably don't know the name. Okay, so every PKI data is expressed in a language that is called ASN.1, which is the same of, let's say, JSON for the REST API. Okay, you write a REST API server to accept data in JSON. JSON is the language. How you format the JSON object that you send to the REST API is given by the API definition. The order of fields or the order of elements in an array in a JSON structure is defined by the API, while JSON is defined by the JSON definition. So ASN is, let's say, like JSON. All the other formats, they're PEM, PKCS, and X509 version 3, are formats that say, okay, let's speak as ASN1, and since we speak ASN1, you have to put this field here, this other field here, this other field here. This is the answer to Matteo's question before. Okay, everything in PKI is written in ASN, but if you want to write a digital signature, then you have to choose the correct format for the digital signature. You can write a digital signature whatever you want in ASN1, but there is only a way to write it in such a way that a server understands it. Rapidly, ASN1 is a tagged format. You put a byte that tells you the type of the data that you are encoding. You put the length of the data, and then you put the data itself according to the type. There is a complication because there is also the possibility to have data without length, and so you have to say, okay, this data has no length, but starts here and goes on and ends here. Okay, somewhat like strings in C, that there is a 0 at the end, similar to that. What is the problem of ASN1? There are multiple ways to express the same thing. For example, the string test1@rsa.com is encodable in these 3 different ways, with 16 in front, which is IA5 string, a string in ASCII, followed by 0D, which is the length, followed by the string. Or you can use a different format for the length, which is 81.0D. Don't ask me what does it mean, but there are different formats for the length. Or you can concat multiple strings together, obtaining the same string. So you can say, okay, this is a multiple, this is a structural object made of these 3 strings, concatenate them together and obtain the strings. Obviously, ASN1 is quite a flexible instrument, but it's a mess if you don't decide some rules for cryptography. You can convert ASN1 to a binary format, which is called BEAR, Basic Encoding Rules, and which is represented here, but BEAR is not unique. So we have DARE, which is distinguished encoding rules, meaning that if you give me an ASN1 value, there is only one encoding in there that correspond to that value. A simple example: in BEAR, you can express false with 0 and true with every number from 1 to 255. In there is only one way to encode the false and only one way to encode the true. Okay, you understand why this is needed, because think about taking a hash of a message in binary format ASN1, and Matteo uses 3 for true and I use 5 for true. Our hashes will never be the same, okay, because we changed it to bits, even if the value in ASN1 is the same. Okay, so we have to be very careful and specify how every single bit is encoded and transmitted. Okay, there are a lot of different constraints in there, but we don't care. There is binary, okay, so it's not human readable. So what we do, we introduce another format, which is called PEM, which stands for Privacy Enhanced Mail, and it is the base 64 representation of a DARE binary string. If you decode this base 64 base 64, sorry, you get the binary representation of a DARE certificate. In particular, you get the certification authority of the Zerynth device manager. This is the certification authority of the device manager. The begin certificate and end certificate strings are not part of DARE. They are the headers and footers of a PEM message. I'm sure you've seen a lot of this stuff around. Some of you hit the head multiple times on certificates expressed like this, but this is let's say the standard way of moving cryptographic stuff in text files. Okay, a server has a certificate and a private key, and they are 99% of the time expressed in this way, unless you are using a Windows-based server that has its own formats and whatsoever. Then there is another format, which is called PKCS, which complicates things more and more, and it is the public key cryptography standard. There are a lot of them, and each of them is used for different purposes. And let's don't care about them. Let's just say that some of them are abandoned. They were proposed, they were used for a bit, and then no more. Some of them are still used. For example, the 13 for the 8 for expressing the private keys, or the 7, if I recall correctly, or the 11. I don't know. Some of them are still used. Some of them are not, but those are ways of expressing in there some cryptographic primitives. Okay. Usually, the most used one are the one for the private and public keys, because it's the most common material in cryptography. Okay, now we are ready to go to the X509 format, which is the format that defines digital certificates. Okay. For this, I'm showing you the certificate of some of the certificates, actually the certificate chain of the Zerynth Device Manager. And from the one of you that are worried that this is private information, I'm saying that, and I'm remarking that certificates are public. There are no secret material in a certificate. Okay. In my certificate for doing the medical profession, there was no secret. Okay, it was just the signature of the Professor Marco Pasquali that was enough to trust that information. How is the certificate organized? Okay, so first you have the version, which is version 3. We are already at X509 version 3. The first thing in a certificate is the serial number. It's not the first thing because I put it there, but because the specification says that the first field of a certificate is the version, the next is the serial number. Okay, so we are following them according to the specification in there. The serial number is a number that can be up to 20 bytes, and it's up to the generator, to the creator of the certificate to give it a meaning if he wants, or just to create a random one if he wants. Obviously, it's suggested to use a random number because otherwise you are giving away information. If you're numbering them like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you give the information to black out that you are at the 5th certificate, okay, and you don't want it because he may be able to use it in some evil way. The other field is the signature algorithm, which says that this certificate is signed with a particular digital signature algorithm. In this case, is ACDSA, calculated on SHA-256 hash of the message. Okay, I hope that now what happens here is easier since we know all the primitives. This certificate is hashed with the SHA-2, and then the digital signature with the ACC cryptography is performed on this hash. Okay, so we expect to have somewhere, and we will see later, the two numbers R and S in this certificate. Okay, as we saw before. The next field, as in my certificate of degree, the next field is the issuer. Who created this certificate? Who is the authority that was able to certify something about the stuff in this certificate? The issuer is this is made of these fields: common name, organizational unit, etc. This is all standard stuff. The most important field usually is the common name. Okay, in this case is Zerynth ECC CA. It means that this has been issued by an entity, and when I say entity, I mean a private key, okay, a cryptographical entity that was that goes by the name of Zerynth Elliptical Cryptography Certification Authority. This entity is of an organization that is called Zerynth, which is in Pisa, which has a sub-organization which is the ZDM, etc., etc., etc. This certificate is valid from the 7th of June of this year to the 1st of June of for the next 25 years. Okay, so it's a good validity. It's a nice range of time. Who is the subject of this certificate? Again, the same as the issuer. So this is a very exceptional certificate because it's a self-signed certificate. The subject is the same as the issuer. It's like if in my certification, in my degree, instead of Marco Pasquali, I was signing my certification and saying, due to the thanks to the power given to me by the Italian Republic and by the University of Pisa, I declare myself today a doctor. Okay, this is what a self-signed certificate is.
So, Giacomo, I have a question on this. So, whenever the subject is equal to the issuer, we can assume that the certificate is self-signed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, by definition, self-signed, signed by myself. So.
And if they are different, the next step is to look for if the issuer is trusted or not.
Yeah, we will see this in the next slide. I hope
this is the reason why we do a self-signed certificate and put in the Cartlandia demo, but it's not.
It doesn't work.
Yes, because the issuer must be.
I will show you why in a moment. Then there is the most important part, which is, okay, people, the subject, I certify with this certificate that the public key of the subject is this one, and this is the elliptic curve cryptography because this is an SCDSA signing the certificate, and because the type of the key is written there, prime 256 version 1, okay, it's called V1, is the name of the SCC curve that we are using, so we know that this is a public key, and that is the elliptic curve that we are using. There are a lot of different elliptic curves with different properties. We are choosing to use this one. Then there is a section of extensions that is, let's say, almost the same as the constraints of my medical degree. Okay, in my medical degree, I was certified to be a doctor. Here, you are certified to be a certification authority because there is a CA true, okay? So this certificate as an extension has the power to be a certification authority and use its own private key to generate other certificates. Because, for example, the key usage extension is certificate sign and CRL sign, okay? What does it mean? It means that the private key corresponding to the subject public key can do this stuff, okay? Can sign other certificates and can sign certificate revocation list, but we will see this later. Also, this certificate, and so the public key associated with it is a CA, and in order to make it easier to recognize and to find the keys, let's say that the name of the subject, of the key of the subject is this one, F6B128. Okay, this is an identifier generated by the one, by the issuer of the certificate that says, let's call that public key like this, because otherwise it's too long. Okay? And then there is the last part, which is the signature of the algorithm. What is this signature about? This signature is for certifying that all the previous information is okay. It is not changed because, as you remember, the digital signature gives you integrity and authenticity. Okay, so this signature here gives you integrity. Nothing before all the signature has been changed, so we can assume that issuer, validity, subjects, etc. are not being tampered with, and also authenticity, meaning that only the issuer of this certificate can generate this signature. So this signature is done with the private key of the issuer, okay? Which in this particular case is the same as the subject, but this is another story. Let's make things difficult. As you noticed, since there is an issuer and the subject, you can build chains of certificates. The certificate on the left is an intermediate certificate that we use in the Zerynth Device Manager, and the one on the right is the certificate for the MQTT endpoint of the Zerynth Device Manager. So on the left, you see that there is a subject of the certificate, which is called Zerynth ECC 0, because this is the 0 level after the CA, okay? And that this subject, this certificate has been issued by Zerynth ECC CA. This one used its own private key, which is a secret, to sign the certificate on the left, okay? So now we have a certificate called Zerynth ECC 0 that has all the fields that it has to be, and if you go on the extension, you see that this certificate can do digital signature, key encipherment, certificate sign, and CRL sign. This means that this certificate has a private key different from the private key of this certificate, and it can sign other certificate, because this certificate itself is a certification authority. Okay, so there is a chain going from a self-signed certificate, the CA of the Zerynth, okay, to another certificate, which is called intermediate, because it is in the middle between the root and the certificates that cannot sign other certificates. And each one of them has an associated private key. This is important. If you have a certificate, somewhere there is a private key that signs that certificate. Okay. Okay. So the server certificate on the right has been issued by the intermediate certificate on the left, because the subject from one side is the same from the issuer on the right side. If you go to the subject key identifier and authority key identifier extension on the left, you see that, and on the right, you see that the authority key identifier on the right, 6C443, let me use the pointer. Good. This thing over here, authority key identifier, is the same as the subject key identifier of the intermediate certificate. This means that this public key is named like this and has been used in this certificate, and the corresponding private key has been used in this certificate to sign it. Okay? If you lost me, I start from the beginning. You see that there are subject key identifier and authority key identifier. This is the identifier of this public key. This is the identifier of this public key. Okay, F6B1 okay, is the same here. F6B1 etc., etc., etc. Because the authority that signed this certificate, Professor Marco Pasquali here, okay, has this public key. This is Professor Marco Pasquali. This is my, let's do like this. This is University of Pisa. Okay, this is the certificate of Professor Marco Pasquali that is used to sign my degree in medicine. Okay, because this has been signed by Marco Pasquali. And there is a document somewhere when there was the head of university election that says that, okay, let's give, thanks to the power of the University of Pisa, a certificate to Professor Marco Pasquali to generate certificates for the medicine students. Okay, and this certificate will last from the start of the career of Marco Pasquali as head of university for, I guess, 7 years. I don't remember if it's 7 or 5 years for the head of university. It's clear like this.
So the chain is upward.
Yeah,
so
from this you go up. I am this is Marco Pasquali, and this is University of Pisa. If you want to to follow the example that I did before with my degree, this is Marco Pasquali, this is University of Pisa, and this is the Italian Republic, because the Italian Republic is the root of authority. So it has a self-signed certificate. One day we say, okay, now we are the Republic of Italy. Let's do a certificate about it. But who can sign it? Just the Republic of Italy, okay? Because
so there is always a self-signed certificate at the root.
Yeah. And this is a problem, and this is a feature, and we will see in a few how it is solved and why it is useful. Okay, so, yeah?
Another curiosity. When also you self-sign a certificate, in the output you have a certificate and a key.
Yes and no. I mean, you will run a command that creates a certificate and an associated key. But you can run a command that creates a self-signed certificate and just using a key that you give as an input.
Okay.
It's not necessary. From a private key, you can generate infinite self-signed certificates.
Okay.
Okay. This stuff here is just pointers. Okay. Are identifiers to reconstruct, to build the chain in an easier way. Otherwise, you have to go to the issuer and check a lot of things to build a chain. With this extension, you can easily identify keys. And as I showed you before, the authority is the subject, and then you can go back to the chain. What does this certificate certifies when it signs this certificate? Certifies that the subject has a common name, which is zmqtt.ndn.zerynth.com. Okay, this is the endpoint. So this is a server certificate. Notice that there are extensions to add multiple names to the same certificate. Okay, because maybe I want the common name usually is one string, but if I want this to be ZMQTT 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, I can add this extension, which is called subject alternative name, SAN. Okay, if you go and see I hope I have, no, I don't have. Okay. If you go to see the extension of the server, you see that the certificate sign and the CRL sign are no more there. Okay, this certificate cannot create other certificates because there are constraints on its key that this key cannot be used for digital signatures, and key encipherment cannot be used for certificate sign. Okay, indeed, this certificate is not a certification authority. CA false. Okay. Also, extended key usage, TLS web server authentication. So you can constrain the usage of a certificate and a key in the same way that the University of Pisa constrained me to be a doctor, not to be a nuclear plant or nuclear engineer. Okay, so you can choose in a certificate what you can do with that key and that certificate. Obviously, that is, yes.
When you say you can choose, it means that the father, I mean, the certificate of the child that generate the children, decide this extension when the certificate is created.
Yes and no, because now I show you how you obtain a certificate. A couple of slides.
Okay.
there is a signature here in this server certificate, which is a signature done with the private key of the certificate over here, okay? Is not done with the private key of the server. This is a signature made with the private key of the parent. This is important, okay? This is Marco Pasquali signing my degree. There was no, let's see if I can show you. I didn't sign this thing. Okay, there is not my signature. There is only the signature of Marco Pasquali. I like very much this example because it matches almost one by one with the actual digital certificates. This is the signature of the left certificate. Okay, and this is what happens. Okay, you have a root CA, which is self-signed, that verifies that as a subject-issuer relation, a subject-issuer relation, until you get to a certificate that cannot, that has not the power to generate other certificates. How do you request? No, sorry. Let's see just some weird stuff. It is true that the root is always a self-signed certificate, but you can have certification authorities that are cross-signed, meaning that two different certification authorities sign the same thing. Or you can have strange graphs like this. This happens when your CA is going to expire. So what you do is you create another CA that is also signed by the previous CA. So all your users the users that are still using the CA1 can and are presented with this certificate can choose to use this chain or to use this chain depending on which one of these they trust. Okay, if the Google CA is going to expire in the next 10 minutes or in the next month, I can choose to use the second, the new one. Okay, but if they give me a certificate that is signed by this and by this, so I can choose. If I trust this, I use this chain. If I don't trust this, I use the other chain. Okay, they use for this.
This is happening in our AWS library.
Yes, and this will happen in 2014 when our CA will expire, but I hopefully not be there to do this stuff. I will leave to do somewhere in the code to explain how, but why? Okay, until here, where is the link? Why I should trust a self-signed certificate if Davide can generate it on its own laptop? Where is the link that gives trust to all the infrastructure? And it's not Tom Cruise, but it's the fact that there exist institutions that are called trust anchors or digital certification companies, whatever, that put in place a lot of real-world stuff, very expensive real-world stuff, to give their private key enough security for us to trust their public key. What does it mean? It means that for example, I don't know, let's say Google has the same server certificates that we have. Okay, they are the same as the one that I show to you, the ZMQTT endpoint. But if you follow the chain, you find that the self-signed certificate, which is the root of the Google PKI, has been generated in a specific machine, which is called HSM, Hardware Security Module, which is following very high security standards. For example, those machines are not connected to anything. not to the internet, not to the local network. We say that they are air-gapped, meaning that around the machine there is only air. There is no cable. There is no connection. If you want to use the machine, you have to enter in that room, and that room is guarded 24/7, and there are cameras, and there are alarm systems, and there are whatever. And you need Tom Cruise to go down from the roof with a cable, avoiding the lasers, to get there and put a floppy on the machine and stole your private key. Okay, this expense of resources in the real world allows us to say, okay, we trust the certification authority of Google, the self-signed certification, the self-signed root certificate of Google, because we know, or we assume, that Google has this kind of security on its premises. He has somewhere in the world, or more than one place probably, machines with HSM inside these rooms that are very heavily guarded. There are different standards for this stuff, and it's called the FIPS, and there are different levels of FIPS, FIPS 1, 2, 3, and 4. And level 4 is the maximum one, and you have to have physical security, okay, for the keys, in a lot of different ways, going from how the hardware is designed to how you can access the hardware to who can access the hardware. I'm not saying, just to give you an example, I follow some security blogs, and they were extremely excited by the fact that a researcher was able to, let's say, guess the key of your keyboard that you were clicking by reading the changes on the light of the lamps on your room. Okay, they were just associating the click of the keyboard or the keyboard to the changes in some physical quantity in the room. So that, for example, if if I can manage to get the light oscillations of the lamps inside the rooms of the Google HSM machines, maybe I can able to grasp some very useful secret, because if I get the private key of Google, I can blackmail them for millions, okay, because I can create certificate to say that my server is a Google server. Okay, this is a very important. It is very important to keep that information secret, and you have to spend a lot of money to keep that information secret. And that's why when you ask a certificate to a digital certification authority, you pay a lot of money, because they have to maintain this system. The other thing that digital certification authorities do is to link the information that you provide to the real world. And this is expensive. If you want a certificate for your website, www.zerynth.com, you have to prove, and this is the claim proof section of my medicine degree, you have to prove that you are the owner of that domain. If you ask that certificate, they cannot give it to you, because you cannot prove that you are the owner of the domain. I can prove that I am the owner of the domain because I know the password to enter into AWS, route 53, and change something in the DNS, assuming that changing something in the DNS is enough of a proof for the digital certification authority to give me that certificate, because this is not always true. For example, you can ask certificates, and we ask that, to digitally sign your code, your program, which is a different certificate from the one that you use for a web server. When you ask for a digital signature certificate for code, you have not only to prove that you exist, but that you are actually that company. We had to disclose our Zerynth partita IVA, our Zerynth number of Camera di Commercio. They asked Camera di Commercio if we actually were a company in Italy, etc. It's a long process, because otherwise you cannot trust a digital certificate. Okay, so this is very important, because this is the link between the digital world of the PKI and the real world. Okay, they do stuff, two kinds of stuff: spending money for protecting the private key and doing checks and proofs in the real world.
Couple of questions.
Yeah. Thanks. So I can drink something and not die.
So everyone can build a self-signed certificate.
Yeah.
But you have to prove that your private key that sign your self-signed certificate must follow the, I don't know the name, PIP 102.
Yeah. No, it's not like this. Let's say you can generate your self-signed certificate. Okay. Then you have to convince me to trust your certificate. Okay.
So how we can do this?
Okay. It depends. There are different levels. If you want to be publicly trusted, you have to have the HSM, you have to have whatever, you have to have the security guards, the cameras, and whatever. If you want to be trusted inside an organization, like we did with the certificates to access our repository, it's enough to get the self-signed certificate and put it in the trusted anchors. Let me show you, because
Trusted.
This is my PC. Okay, this is a Linux PC. If you check here, ls atc, I don't remember, SSL, CR certificates. Okay, there is a folder with the trusted source. Sorry, anchor. Probably is extracted. Let's say anchors. No, should be there. Extracted. Okay, CA here. I'm sorry, I have this thing hiding the keyboard. Okay, extracted. Extracted. I don't know why it's making an issue with this. Okay, CA here. Oh, okay. Those are 10 files, okay, of trusted root certificates. This means that when my laptop connect to Google, he will find that he trusts Google because he has a copy of the Google root certificate, self-signed certificate in this directory. Linux distribution that I use. If I don't want to trust, I don't know, this one, just remove this file, and all the websites that are ultimately signed by this root certificate will give you an error, because they will not be able to construct a valid chain from the server certificate to a trusted root authority. So if you want to connect to our internal network in a trusted way, just put the self-signed certificate that you made here. If you put it here, the browser will accept the connection as valid. Okay.
Actually, without a warning.
Without a warning, because the browser will be able to find the root certificate. And
only your machine.
Only my machine, okay. Right? So this is actually a very good question, because who is the one choosing the trust that we have? It's the operating system, but it's also the browser, because when you install the browser, you also install the certification authority roots that the browser trusts, and Firefox trusts different certificates than Chrome, and Chrome trusts different certificate than Edge. I don't know if Edge has certificates, but Safari and whatever. Okay, so ultimately, when you choose the browser, you choose the authority to trust. Okay, and why those are trusted? Because there are auditing companies that go and check if everything is FIPS, etc., etc., etc. So we trust this. Okay, but if you want to customize your if you want to trust your self-signed certificate, you can just put it there. Okay. Also, let's check this in the standard library. In the toolchain, and I hope that we can. Okay, under base. Okay, this is Zerynth code. You see that there is certs.pem. Okay, what is this? This is a list of the trusted root that the Zerynth toolchain trusts. Okay, those are all self-signed certificates. Okay, it's a lot of them. And this is important because here, somewhere, there is a certificate that is the one that issued our backend.zerynth.com certificate. If you remove it from here, the Zerynth toolchain will not be able to work anymore because it cannot trust the HTTPS server of our backend. Also notes that from the next version, we also will trust our own ZDM certificate. I put them there. So there is the IoT production, the test, and the stage. So that will be easier for our toolchain to, for example, start an MQTT broker that will automatically recognize our CA. I hope this clear up the things for you. Questions?
But with the list of PEM that you showed us now, if we want to remove them, we should add the root of the father of our self-signed certificate to a trust anchors.
Yeah, but not the father, the self-signed certificate itself.
Yes, the self. So in that case,
take this one, put into the anchors, and you can connect to a server that has a certificate signed by this without problems.
Okay.
Oh, and now the questions. Do we have an HSM? No. So why people should trust our self-signed certificate? Because the private key of our certificate is actually in a HSM, but it's a software HSM hosted by AWS. AWS as a service to work as an HSM for you. Okay, so we are not FIPS whatever maximum level compliant. We cannot be a public certified trusted CA root, but we can reach quite a high level of security. Notice that this is the root certificate of the MQTT endpoint. So this is the certificate for the devices, but actually the servers, the API servers, have a completely different certificate signed by a public trusted anchor. Okay. Otherwise, no one would be able to call our API without configuring the trusting anchor and adding
because the ZDM backend is public. So because the ZDM backend is public.
Yeah. So if you want people to access it with the browser or with curl or with whatever without changing their trust anchors, you will need to be to have a certificate that is signed by a trust anchor, a public trust anchor. Okay. And that is the standard. But for devices that have, let's say, first they have constraint. Those certificates are shorter. Okay. And then the security is not it's important, but not as important as being publicly recognized. Okay. I mean, the device must recognize the ZDM server it doesn't need to recognize the Google servers. Okay, so we don't really need a public certificate for these endpoints. To answer the question by Davide before, how do you request a certificate? You create something that is called a CSR, certificate request. CSR, certificate request. That is done like this. Hello, I am the subject, common name, blah 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 blah. This is my public key. So what happens is that when you ask for a certificate, you generate, you server, you client, you entity that wants a certificate, generate your own private key wherever you want. Okay, in your laptop with a magical ritual, whatever you want, you generate your own private key. You sign the the certificate request with your private key. And what do you sign? You sign the value of your public key. So you are telling the certification authority that you are named like this, that this is your public key, that attributes that you want to do this stuff with your certificate. So you want to be known as this name, and this is your signature. In this case, this signature is done with the private key of the one asking for the certificate. What is the purpose of this signature? Is to show the certification authority that you own the private key corresponding to this public key. Okay? In the certificate, what happens is that with the signature, you prove that that certificate has been signed by the parent certificate, okay, by the parent authority, by Marco Pasquali, okay, or by University of Pisa. In this case, you are proving that you own that private key because only you could have generated this signature that corresponds to this public key. The certificate authority gets this information, verifies this signature thanks to this, and decide what to give you. Okay, so it can give you, if you are asking for a server certificate, it gives you a server certificate. If you are asking for a digital sign certificate, it gives you a digital sign certificate. If you are asking for a certification authority certificate, it may give you a certification authority certificate. All these things have a different price when you are going to buy them from a public digital company. If you want to generate them by yourself, feel free to experiment. For this, I have published a couple of weeks ago 2 images on our Docker Hub. Those are public, and this is a modification of CFSSL, which is a toolchain written in Go by Cloudflare, okay, to manage PKIs. Okay, PKIs are difficult, so a toolchain that does what you want is good. And with this, you can actually create your own self-signed certificate. You can create your intermediate certificate, and you can create your web certificate or your client certificate by saying, okay, this is the configuration that I want, and give me the output from this request. Okay. Oh, let's see if I can back. Okay. Now, just to have some fun, let's see.
The certification request you simulate. The Zerynth backend asks to something trusted, some anchors, to give us a certificate that everyone can trust our server.
I did, not our backend, but I did it manually. I went to, I don't remember which one, Komodo or Sectigo. I asked not this, but I asked for backend.zerynth.com. They asked me to create a CSR, so I had to create my own the server private key, the CSR. I sent them the CSR. They asked me to prove that I was the owner of the website, I had to add something on the DNS that they can check. For example, they said put this string into a text field in the DNS. They automatically checked that I was the owner of that backend, and they issued me a certificate with 1 year or 2 year validity. Okay, so I have the private key. The certification authority doesn't know my private key because it is always on the backend server and not and it is not given to the certification authority. This is important because if you check, for example, AWS IoT Core for the device creation, for the device certificate creation, there are two ways. One of which Amazon creates the client certificates and the keys for the device. And there is another way in which the device generates the CSR, send it to AWS and obtain a client certificate. The difference is enormous because in the first case, Amazon knows the private key. They say that they doesn't store, and it's true. They say that it is generated only once, and it is true. But probably they have a log, or there is a proxy, or there is some cache where your private key of your device may stay for some time. Okay, so it is not as safe and as secure as having a CSR, because in the CSR you never disclose your private key. If you ask a certificate and a key, you are, let's say, lowering the level of security of your certificate, because someone else may have seen your secret key. Okay, so let's have fun for a bit and going to check the certificate of big companies. Okay, this is Amazon. If you go here in Firefox, you can see that the connection is secure. So this means that whatever the certificates are, we have the trusted anchor on this machine. Okay, I can go and check more information and view certificate. And what do we discover? That there is an Amazon certificate that is valid for www.amazon.com, that is also valid for all these domains. Okay, DNS name, blah 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 blah, and it has been, the subject is this. Okay, US, Washington, Seattle, Amazon.com.inc, and it has been issued by DigiCert Inc. So another company is signing the Amazon.com web server certificate. Okay, and that certificate is called DigiCert Global CA G2, and if you go into your Trust Anchor directory, you will find it. But it is here. Okay, so we can check that. We can check who is DigiCert. DigiCert is this one. It's called DigiCert Global CAG2. This is the company. It's in the US, and this certificate here has been issued by someone else. Again, who is this? Is the DigiCert Global Root G2, and this is the self-signed certificate. So DigiCert is a company that has a root certificate called G2 that is self-signed because the issuer name is the same as the subject. I don't have the pointer, but you can see the arrow. The subject name is the same as the issuer name. Okay, it's valid until 2038. Okay, a lot of years. Okay, this is an old certificate. It's used the RSA 2048 bits, the minimum security of RSA, as we saw. This is the serial number, whatsoever. This is the subject key. 4E2254, etc., which is the authority key of the intermediate certificate. Okay, so this certificate has been signed by this DigiCert Global CAG2 has been signed by the root. Okay, and this has a private key that has signed this certificate over here. Okay, and this certificate it is not a certification authority. This is from the Amazon.com, because the server certificate can only do digital signature and key encipherment, so cannot generate other certificates. And it is used for self-authentication and cloud authentication. And there is a lot of other fields that I don't want to give into the detail. Just one that I want you to notice is the fingerprints. The fingerprints is not an X509 field. It is not in the certificate. It is something that is calculated from the certificate. This is the hash of the certificate, which is not in the certificate itself, but it is useful to identify the certificate because, as we saw 2 hours ago, hashes can be used as unique identifiers. Okay, so this is the unique identifiers in the SHA-256 of the Amazon.com certificate. Let's see another interesting. Where is it? No, I lost. Let's see Google. This is interesting. Very interesting. Okay, this is Google. You go there. No, you go here in the lock. It's secure, okay? You open the information, you go into the view certificate, and you find that also Google uses another digital sign company, which is GTS, an intermediate certificate, which is GTS GA101, and in the end, the root certificate is of global sign, and if you check, it's a global, it's a trusted anchor inside the trust directory in your PC. And you see that it's going to expire very soon, next year, okay? December next year, this certificate will not be valid anymore. So what will happen? They will cross-assign things, or they will release a version of Chrome and a version of whatever, or a version of new operating system with a new root of global sign that will sign the certificate of Google. One interesting thing about this is that, let's see. I don't remember where it was. I lost it. However, this kind of certificate is signed with somewhat outdated algorithm. I don't find it here in this stuff, but I hope they don't give me the full certificate, so I cannot show you. Wait, let's see. Okay, it's here, PEM. I found it. Okay, they give you the PEM certificate of the server. Okay, let me copy this certificate. Let me go to certificate parser, certlogic.com. Very useful. You put the certificate here, you decode the certificate, and you see that this is the information that they give you. The last time I checked, they were using signature algorithm that was deprecated, okay? Because it was signed not with SHA-2 but with SHA-1, okay? And this parser was saying, hey, okay, you're using a certificate, the key is good, okay, it's not in the blacklist, the key size is good, but watch out because the signature is using an old hash function. So trust it, but with care. And actually they changed it. So there is good security at Google. Last one is zdn.zerynth.com, which is our server. Let's check our certificates. Our certificates are here. More information. View certificate. Our certificate is for every domain under zdn.zerynth.com. Has been signed by Let's Encrypt Authority, okay, which is in turn be signed by DST root CA. Okay, what happens? You know, Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt is a service by Mozilla that allows you to obtain a certificate in an automated way. Okay, they have this certificate, which is intermediate because it has been signed by a different company, DST root. Okay, this is the intermediate CA, which the issuer is another company. It's not Mozilla. Okay, they use these to generate certificates for you. Those certificates are very short-lived. They last 90 days. Okay. This certificate is going to expire when we are on holiday. But luckily, we have an automatic service on ZDM that every night asks for a renew of this certificate to Let's Encrypt. If there is nothing to renew, we still use the old certificate. Otherwise, Let's Encrypt give us a new certificate.
For the 4.0 platform, the reminder is on calendar.
Yeah, it's on calendar. Yeah.
My calendar.
Because that is also mine, but because that and we will remove it. Or we can add an automatic stuff also there. Notice this. Here we are not paying anything. This certificate is free. Okay, because Let's Encrypt is free. By being free, you get let's say two features. The first is that the certificate is short-lived, okay, because it's a free service and they don't have the infrastructure to guarantee the same security that DFT can. Okay, they are not a digital a public trust anchor. Okay, so they say, okay, I give you a certificate for a shorter amount of time, because you know that you have forward secrecy. So if they, you have to change the key every 3 months. It's not a problem because it's automatic. And how do they give you? How do they ask you the proof that you own the domain? 2 ways. Either you can change the DNS, okay, automatically, and we do it because we have the DNS on AWS, which is updatable via API. So we have a script that every time that Let's Encrypt asks us to prove the domain, that we own the domain, we just run that script and add whatever Let's Encrypt wants to our DNS. Another way, if you want to have less security, you can just put a file on the web server and Let's Encrypt will go there, take that file and authenticate your request and give you a certificate. Okay, let's go back. We have to go a little bit faster because otherwise you have to listen to me while I cook dinner. Okay, so some advanced topic on PKI. Couple of problems. First, if you have a certificate that is valid for until 2014 or 2050, and they stole your private key, how do you block? How do you say to people, don't trust the certificate anymore because the private key has been stolen? You have to put in place some additional structure, and the first one was CRL, Certificate Revocation List. That is a list, a file, with the serial numbers of the certificate that you don't have, that you should not trust. Okay, that list is signed by the certification authority, so you can trust the certification authority not to use that certificates, and the certification authority has the power to revoke a certificate before it expires. If I don't know, tomorrow I do some horrible crime, they will revoke my license to be a doctor. Okay, they can make the certificate invalid. The problem with CRL is that they are big. Okay, they are very, very long. It's a long file. You have to check it every time. It's an old way. It's good in internal stuff, but it's not good for public stuff. So you have OCSP, which is another mechanism. Every time you ask a server like Google to give your certificates, you also go and ask with this protocol to the certification authority of that certificate if that certificate is still valid. Okay. For example, if Google had implemented OCSP in the page that we saw before, we would have asked the root certificate, which is not Google, is another server, if this Google certificate is still valid. This is obviously a problem, because first, the CA authority knows that you're accessing Google. So there is a privacy leak. Every time you access a site, the CA site knows what certificate you were checking. Okay. Also, there is a an enormous server burden, okay? Because the CA authority should have so many servers that it can answer every OCSP request from every request to Google, which is a lot, okay? So this is not always feasible. What we will see is that OCSP stapling is what usually is used. What is OCSP stapling? Instead of requesting to the CA authority every time if the certificate is valid, Google itself puts into the certificate the signature that signed by the certification authority that its own certificate is valid for the next half an hour or for the next 3 days, okay, whatever period of time. So you receive the certificate of Google, you receive the OCP stapling, and you say, okay, this is valid. The time frame, the time of the OCSP given by the CA through Google is okay. I accept the certificate. It's not as real time as OCSP, but it's okay. Okay? And here the burden is on the server and not on the CA, and there is no privacy leak. Okay, we are finally to the TLS. I hope. How do you put this thing? Oh, thanks. I got that. Let me pretend again. Okay. This is weird stuff. Okay, we are putting everything together, and we are seeing a lot of difficult things, weird things that will be happening in the TLS. Okay, what is TLS for? The goal of TLS is to establish a secure encrypted channel. I want to start a conversation with Matteo, and I want to do in a way that nobody else can listen to the messages we are going to exchange. I don't want to have any pre-shared secrets with Matteo. Okay, I don't want to meet him at the bar and giving him the secret key that we use for our communication. I want to use a key agreement protocol and get a fresh secret every time. I want forward secrecy because if they listen or crack one of our conversation, they can crack previous or forward or the next conversation that we are having in 2 weeks. Okay, and I want it to be fast. TLS is at level OSI level 6 presentation layer, the layer that is in charge of taking the data from the network and changing it in order for the application to understand it. Okay, so encryption and security is presentation layer. This is very good information. This means that you can implement HTTP or HTTPS or MQTT or MQTTS without worrying for security, because security is at presentation layer. So if I want to add security to my MQTT server, what I have to do is switch from TCP to TLS, and the broker will receive the messages as if they were unencrypted. The broker is not aware. The broker is at level 7, so it's not aware of what's going on the other levels. Okay, it just receives MQTT packets. The presentation layer will encrypt and decrypt them. Why is there and why is not at level 4? Because the name is wrong. It's not transport layer security. It's presentation layer security. But TLS is implemented on top of TCP. Okay, when you say TLS, you say TCP. So it's built on above level 4. Since level 5 are sockets, the only place where you can put TLS is level 6. How does it work from a bird eye point of view? The first thing that I do with Matteo is to apply a key agreement algorithm and obtain a master key, a secret that only I and Matteo can use for this particular communication. Then I have to authenticate the public key of Matteo, if he is behaving like the server, okay, by checking the certificates that he is sending to me by comparing them and verifying them with the trusted anchors that I have on my machine, okay? And then I have to verify that all the messages that I exchanged in this phase with Matteo are not being modified by someone else, okay? Once I did this, I have a key or multiple keys that I can use to encrypt symmetrically all the data that will be sent. So TLS does most of the work at the connection time. When you connect to a server, there starts a lot of steps that we are going to see now, one by one, where you get all these properties. Notice that the most important property here is, and most difficult to understand, and I hope to do a good work to explain, is this one: authenticate the public key of the entity. We need authentication, okay? We don't need authenticity. This is the most important phase. So let's go. Step one, Bob is the client, Alice is the server. In the step one, that is called, that happens as soon as you do connect, Bob sends a message that is called the client hello that contains a lot of stuff. The most important is the version we are using for TLS, 32 random bytes that are the client random bytes, a session ID, we will see this later, a set of cipher suits, now we are going to explain what they are, and a set of extensions that are not the same as the extension of the certificate, but are the extension to the TLS protocol. So the same name for two different things. Bear in mind this name, SNI, server name indication, because it's very important that we will see it later. And we have Black Hat here waiting for cracking our conversation. This thing here is in clear, okay? So Black Hat knows the TLS version, the random bytes, the session ID, the cipher suite, and the extensions. Okay, he knows everything. The only encrypted step is the last one, okay? Everything that you are going to see now is not encrypted. Then, what is a cipher suite? A cipher suite is a selection of the algorithms that I need to perform the TLS. I need 4 algorithms. The key agreement, the authentication algorithms, the encryption algorithms for the communication, and an integrity algorithm, okay? So I send, as Bob, in the first step, the list of cipher suits that I support. TLS doesn't force me to know every single cipher suit of the world. I can just know one of it and of them and use it. It's up to the server to accept or not that kind of cipher suit. If it is not deemed to be safe enough, the server will close the connection. Okay. So let's choose this cipher suite and let's break into pieces. We are using TLS. We are using ACDHE, which is elliptic curve diffie element with ephemeral keys as a key agreement algo. We are using ACDSA as an authentication algorithm. Then we are using AES 120 with a key which is 128 bits using the CBC mode of operation. And these will be used as a symmetric key for our messages. I also choose to use SHA-1 as my integrity algorithm. Okay, this is known to Bob, to Alice, and to Black Hat. Alice, as the server, answered back with, okay, of all the TLS versions that you sent me, I choose this one. Those are my 32 random bytes, the server bytes. This is the session ID that we'll be using, and this is the cipher suite that I choose to use to talk with you. And also, here is the set of extensions that, as a server, I'm using. Again, Black Hat knows everything of this stuff. Then, what happens? It's step 3, server certificate. Alice is forced to send Bob the certificate or the certificates that are needed for Bob to verify, to trust Alice. Okay, so Alice has a private key, okay, and has a public key, which is written in a server certificate, which is signed by intermediate certificate, which in the end are signed by the server self-signed root certificate that Bob trusts, because this is either in the browser or in the directory of the trusted anchor. Or if you want to do the example for the IoT, this is the CA certificate that we put in the Zerynth firmware. Okay, that CA there is the same as the trusted anchor directory in my laptop. The device is small, so you cannot put every single certification authority. You put just the one that you need to trust. In this step, okay, Bob is verifying the chain certificate only. Is verifying that this one is signed by this one, and that this one is signed by this one. At this step, there is no proof that Alice knows this kind of stuff, okay? Because this data is public. This data is public. Black Hat could send the same message. Okay, this is important. This is an authenticity step, not an authentication step. Bob is checking the authenticity of the certificates. It's not authenticating Alice. Bob is checking a property of the message he's receiving, of the data he's receiving. He is not sure now that he's talking with Alice. He could be talking with Black Hat. Okay? This is extremely important. Step 3, optional. It also works the other way around. Now, Alice could ask Bob a certificate to prove that Bob is Bob. Okay? This step is optional. When you connect to google.com, this step is not there. But when you connect to our repository, this step is there, because if you don't have the Zerynth certificate for the internal stuff in your web browser, you cannot access it. Okay? Again, here, Alice is just verifying that the client certificate is okay with respect to the client certification authority chain that Alice has and trusts. Okay. Still, she is not authenticating Bob. She is just checking the authenticity of the certificates. Okay. If something here is wrong, or for example, Bob does not trust this thing, or Alice send a server certificate that is not signed by this stuff here, the TLS protocol ends. This is called the handshake, and the handshake ends with Bob saying, "I don't trust you. Bye." Okay. And again, everything happens in the clear. There is no encryption in these steps. Everything is readable by Alice and by Black Hat. No private keys used to encrypt anything. Okay?
This optional step 3.
Yeah.
Where it is written that must be also Bob send the client certificate.
It's a configuration of Alice, of the server. If you require a client certificate, and Bob does not send it to you, the steps, the server closes the connection.
Okay, so it's the server.
Yeah, and I don't remember exactly, but probably it's in the extension or somewhere here where the server says, okay, I want to talk, if you want to talk to me, send me your certificate. But this is optional, okay? Now things are going to become interesting, because what happens, we have to perform a key agreement protocol. So we start using Diffie-Hellman. What do? Bob generates an ephemeral, temporary, use the synonym that you want, just for this communication, private key, and a corresponding public key with the ACC scheme, because we are using the ACDHA algorithm for the key agreement part. And Alice does the same. I think that the notation is okay. DA is the private key of Alice, QA is the public of Alice, and the same goes for Bob. Black Hat now doesn't know DA and doesn't know DB, because these happen in a safe environment in your PC. Okay, it's not sent. Still, there is no cryptography yet. Okay, only verification up to now, and we are the 4th step. This is the authentication step in action. Okay, this is the most important step of all the TLS. It is called server key exchange. And what happens is that Alice sends to Bob the ephemeral key that she generated here, QA, signed with the private key of the server certificate. Okay, let me go back. DAC stands for private key of Alice for the certificate. She's signing a number. Okay, a number. Don't get confused by the fact that it is public key. She signs a number with the private key of the server certificate. This one, okay, the one that has been used to generate the CSR for the SCA in order to give Alice this certificate. So Bob verified the entire chain. He trusts the SCA. The fact that Alice possesses this private key is written here, is certified here, but it's proven here. And why it's proven? Because only Alice can sign something with a key that is of which the public key is in a certificate. Okay, so Black Hat now can't do anything because it doesn't know the AC. Okay, this is the authentication step, not only authenticity, because this is like a challenge for Bob. Bob is receiving something, a number, signed with something that only Alice can use. And this number is valid only for this communication. If Black Hat wants to crack the next communication, he cannot use this information. This signature here proves that Alice is there and she's talking because she generated this and only she can do this thing. If you also put a timestamp here, Bob is also more than happy to verify that only Alice could have generated that stamp there. It's not exactly like this, the protocol, okay? But I mean, there is not only QA in this information, there are other information, but the most important one is this, okay? So we are using the private key of the certificate to sign some material for the key agreement protocol. This algorithm here is ACDSA. Okay, let me go back to the cipher. Is this one the authentication algorithm? Okay, it's a different algorithm from this one. They are used together. Indeed, the cipher suite name is ACDHE. ECADSA with this other part. Okay, so these two are used together, but this is used for key agreement and this is used for authentication. And to authenticate, you need a public key, a private key to sign something, and this private key is trusted by Bob because it's the same that is obtained during the server certificate. Okay, this is. If you get this, you get TLS. Then we go on explaining why this is the authentication step. Because nothing prevents Black Hat, okay, to put himself in the middle and perform a double key agreement, one with Bob and one with Alice, and full Alice to be talking with Bob and Bob to be talking with Alice. Instead, they are both talking with with Black Hat. Nothing in the key agreement algorithm prevents this. Okay, Bob, if Bob receives a fake key from Black Hat, cannot know that the key is not coming from Alice and from Black Hat. Because there is nothing about authentication in the key agreement protocol. The only way to authenticate is that Alice use a key that is certified by a certification authority that Bob trusts. Since the poor Black Hat doesn't know this key, he cannot go on in this situation. Because the next step here would be for Black Hat to send this stuff here, QBHB, public key of Black Hat for the key agreement protocol, signed with this one. But it doesn't know this one. So it cannot authenticate. It can do a lot of bad stuff. It can mix the keys. It can do whatever. It can fool Bob in thinking that he is Alice until this step, because this step is only doable by Alice and is trusted by Bob because there is a public key infrastructure that says that this key is actually used by Alice to request a certificate from a trusted anchor. Everyone is still there and alive? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So you get you get the importance of this step. Okay. We are exchanging. We are performing a key agreement algorithm that by itself does not have authentication as a property. We are mixing it with a public key infrastructure to obtain a key agreement algorithm that also gives us authentication. Okay. Obviously, if you requested the client certificate in step 3, there is an optional authentication step also for the step 5. In this case, it happens exactly the same, but in reverse. So Alice receives QB signed by DBC. DBC is just a property of Bob, and this trusted because because Bob has sent a client certificate that certifies this key, and Alice trusts the Bob anchor. Okay, this is what happens in the ZDM. This is the firmware. It has this is the firmware. It has a private key with which we generated a client certificate, and the server received something signed by that private key, so the server is sure that this is talking with a Zerynth powered device. Otherwise, anything else could be talking with our server, and we don't know. So the authentication can be two-way. In this step, Bob is sure to be talking with Alice, but Alice doesn't know who he's talking to, because there is no exchange of information, of authentication information from Bob and Alice. If you do step 5 and step 5 optional, there is mutual authentication. Means that Bob is sure to be talking with Alice, and Alice is sure to be talking with Bob. This is what the maximum level of security, and this is the one that we are going to implement in the ZDM, and it's already implemented in many different places.
Giacomo, I have a question. This optional step 5, you can perform this only if you have done the step 3 optional. The optional
They are linked.
The
client key exchange is linked to whatever else, to the client certificate step.
Okay.
Because otherwise Alice cannot trust the CA.
She receives this thing, but this thing is not linked to any PKI, so anyone can use it. We are almost at the end. There are 7 steps. What do we do next? We do some key derivation function, meaning that we use the server random bytes that we sent in the step 2. The client random bytes that we sent in the step 1, together with QA and DB that we exchanged in this algorithm, okay? And the same happens here with different numbers, but we saw before that that combining these together gives the same secrets from Alice and Bob. They, from these, derive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 secret things, two of which the client write key and server write key will be used in the AES 128 CBC algorithm that we saw before in the secret suite as a key. The IV will be used as the initialization vector for the CBC, and the MAC will be used here because the last check, the last step of TLS is, hey Alice, can we check that Black Hat didn't change any message that we exchanged? So Bob takes all the messages received by Alice or exchanged in the previous phases and performs an HMAC. If you remember, is authenticity and integrity check. Okay, it uses as a secret the CMAC, which is this one, the client write MAC and the server write MAC. Okay, so both of them are exchanging the proof that they received just the message that they received, and that these messages are the one that are intended to be used. Okay, because you never know. Black Hat will change a lot of things in the background without us knowing it. Okay, so this is an additional step for final verification of the integrity of the entire communication up to now. Obviously, Black Hat cannot do anything here and is dead, and is asking itself how to crack the communication. Here is completely dead because he has no. Bob and Alice managed to generate their own master secret, so they can go on with the communication without Black Hat doing anything. And then what do? Finally, we exchange the message. Bob can send the message M encrypted with the client write key that they both agreed on, and Alice can answer with the response encrypted with the server write key. Black Hat is dead. No, it cannot understand what they are talking. So now finally we have privacy. Notice that this is the first encrypted step. Okay, all the other ones are in clear. This is a signature. This is not an encryption. Okay, up to now everything is in clear. Here we have the first encrypted message because finally we managed to have to agree on a key common between Bob and Alice, and that Black Hat cannot know. And that was TLS version 1.2. We should go and do 1.3 because it changes, but I don't want to spoil the fun. So you can just remove the pointer, click on this stuff over here, and you will see this wonderful website where you have the TLS 1.3 step by step with all the bytes and all the annotation and all the formats that you want to check and whatever, the things that I was saying you before, cipher suit, compression method, with the actual encryption that you are going to see in a TLS communication. Okay, it's very nice to read. There is also the TLS 1.2 version that I hope is this. Okay, yeah, here you have step by step what happens between Alice and Bob during the TLS handshake. Okay, this is exactly the same that I've explained in the slide. Why TLS 1.3? Because it's faster. There is one less exchange of messages. The handshake is encrypted, so Black Hat is even less able to do something bad. Rapidly on the extensions. Why there are extensions on the TLS protocol? The most important one is, for our purposes, is ME. Server notification, service name indication. Okay, this is an extension in which the client sends to the server the domain he wants to access. Okay, when you connect to Google and Google supports SNE and the client wants to use SNE, the client says, I want to talk with www.google.com. What happens on why this information? Because the server, Alice, has to choose the certificate chain to send to the client. Okay, because on one server, you can have hundreds and millions of certificates. Our servers, are working with Nginx, and every endpoint can have a different certificate. Okay, we are using a wildcard certificate, asterisk dot whatever, but you can have different servers and with different requirements for security. So we need a mechanism to allow the server to choose the right certificate to send to the client. The clients want to speak with google.com. So let me find the certificate chain for google.com and send it to the client. This is also useful because the client can then verify that the common name or the SNA, the additional DNS name of the server are actually the ones he wants to talk to. If you want to talk to Alice in the certificate, there must be written Alice. So this server name indication is useful also for this. And is useful also for load balancing the TLS connection, because you have a load balancer that gets the SNI extension and then forwards the traffic to the services behind it. Session ID and session tickets. As you noticed, in the client and hello and in the server hello, there were session ID numbers. What does it is for? I mean, it is quite expensive every time that you want to do a connection to a web server or to a REST API to do the full handshake, okay? To redo the ESE, DHA, and DHE, DSA, and whatever. So there is a mechanism to cache the parameters. Okay, let's the client and server agree on reusing the secrets also for the next, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7 connections. So we don't have to every time calculate everything. There are two ways to do this. The first is session caching, where the server saves in a database the ID of the session and all the material needed to restore that session. But this is not used a lot because it's a strain on the servers. If you manage hundreds and millions of connections, you have to keep millions of entries in the database, so it's resource intensive. The other, and this is called session caching. The other mechanism is stateless resumption. How does it work? The server, in an extension, and in a step of the TLS handshake, sends you a message with the parameters, okay, signed by a key of the server. So the client can keep that ticket and reuse it in the next connection, saying, hey, you gave me this ticket for this connection, let's reuse it, okay? Now the burden is on the client, because the client has to store the session ticket. The server just receives the session ticket, verifies that it has been created by the server itself, verifies that the information inside is correct, and start and skip a lot of the algorithm that we just saw, and starts immediately to talk with the client with the parameters that were established before. This is, for example, the reason why if you open the web browser and the network console, when you connect to an HTTPS endpoint, the first connection, the first resource that you get from the server takes a long time. All the other HTTPS resources take a shorter time, because in the first connection, you establish a session and then you reuse it for all the other, for example, images that you have to download in a page. If you download a page behind an HTTP server that downloads 10 images, the first image takes longer, all the other are faster, because they don't have to redo all the stuff about authentication. They reuse a previous session. Oof, okay. It's quite late. I don't know if you want to go to see in what happens in an actual handshake on the TLS, or if you want to check the security of the ZDM. I would prefer the security of the ZDM, because we could always check the steps and the bytes and whatever, the details in the office when you want. But if you want to, I mean, your choice. If you want to see the bytes going, we can see the bytes going.
I vote for security.
Okay, one vote is enough. How do we implement all this stuff, PKI, TLS, cryptography, and whatever in the CDM? With a lot of work. First, we provide different device authentication model so that our server is sure to be talking with a Zerynth-powered device, and we provide a way for devices to authenticate ourselves. The first methodology that we use is the fixed token, and this is by now you know that this is not an authentication. This is not a real authentication strategy. Okay, what happens in the fixed token? The credentials of the device are generated by the ZDM server with an HS256 signature. If you remember, this is a symmetric key signature. What does it mean? That the ZDM, let me take the point, that the ZDM stores a symmetric key, okay, in the safest way that it can, but still, you already see that this is not safe enough for many purposes, because the key is on the device, the key is on the ZDM, and so it's not a symmetric key, okay? So there is a possibility that our servers leak the keys, or the keys are stolen, or whatever. So this is not a good, but this is the easiest one, okay? What do we do with this secret symmetric key? We generate a signature on something that says, okay, I am the device, name it whatever. This is easy to do. There is no computational burden on the device, because the device does not need to know how to perform cryptographic primitives. It just has a token, okay, generated by the CDM, which is fixed, never expires, stays in the firmware or in the flash or whatever, and it is used to accept that connection, that TLS connection, that's credentials of the device, and to authenticate it. Why we are using this to authenticate it? Because the TLS connection that we are doing is done with certificates only from the server. In this authentication model, the device has no certificate, so he needs something else to prove that he is the device. And to do so, we use a fixed token. There are many security flaws. First, reproducibility. The key is in the ZDM, so the ZDM could generate other tokens and by error or by, I don't know, and allow other devices to identify themselves as this device. This is not good. Once the token is stolen, it cannot be revoked. There is no way. Okay, we have to go manually to the server and eliminate it, but then the device doesn't know a new token, cannot generate a new token, so it's lost forever. And the duration of the token is infinite, and this is quite bad. Okay, we want range of times. The next step, obviously, the credentials are in this token model are JWT token. What are JWT token? Are a way of encoding some credential, where the first part gives you the algorithms for the signature, then gives you some parameters. This is a ZDM JWT token with a very long expiration date, and the indication of the key to be used for the signature, and then this is the signature. Okay, this is the HS256 signature of the information before the signature. Notice that the JWT token is not encrypted. This part is in clear, this part is in clear, it's just base 64. The other part here is a signature, it's not an encryption. Okay, so having a JWT is not like having a certificate. Okay, you have always to send JWT tokens using a TLS communication, because if you are sending them in the clear, Black Hat can take them and use them to identify as a device to your platform. So this is a requirement. using JWT tokens as a mean for authentication in the clear is like Zoom using EBC, and is like Sony PlayStation 3 using non-random numbers. Okay. Also, this is not authentication, guys. This is not authentication. This is authenticity. Okay. Digital signatures, both symmetric and asymmetric, are a way for authentication, for authenticity and integrity. Means that this is not tampered with, this is not tampered with, and this part can only be created by someone knowing some secret key, but created, not communicated. Okay. When our servers receive a JWT token, all we can know, all we can prove is that that JWT has been created by someone knowing a key, but not that someone else has not stolen it and is using on behalf of the original entity. Okay, this is the difference that is important. We are using JWT tokens for authentication when actually they provide authenticity. Okay, they provide the authenticity of this content, but not the authentication of the communication. Sending a JWT token is not authentication. Next step is using a token, not a fixed token. In this case, the credentials are generated by the device using a digital signature algorithm, symmetric or asymmetric. The ZDM store the symmetric key or the public key of the device. Okay, better way is doing this. Okay, while the device stores its own private key. How does the ZDM know about the public key? There will be a moment in the device provisioning when it comes out of the manufacturing facility where the public key is transmitted to the ZDM. Okay, then it's the device that generates a JWT token when needed. Okay, so this is better than the fixed token. It's still authenticity. Okay, because the device can decide to generate the token that lasts for 1 year. So for 1 year, we accept authenticity instead of authentication. But it's better than the fixed token. Okay, where the device doesn't even know how to generate a JWT token. It just sends a string. Okay. This is also easy to start with. We will release the support for the ZDM library firmware in the next release. But there is some computational burden on the device because it must be able to perform at least a couple of algorithms with different difficulties. It must be able to generate a JWT, so it must be able to encode in base 64, and it also must be able to accept the current time because there is an expiration field in the JWT. Okay, so with respect to the fixed token, you have a device that must be capable of doing more things. The duration of the credentials of the JWT and the authenticity of that JWT are determined by the firmware, not by the ZDM. So I, that I am a firmware programmer, can decide to create a JWT that lasts for 1 minute, and then when I have to reconnect, I create another one. What are the security flaws of this approach? Well, it is bad if the keys are generated by the ZDM. There are windows of times where the token can be stolen and can be reused by Black Hat and can be reused to identify oneself as the device. And then if you use symmetric key, you are going to have repeatability problems. How do we do things better? With different approaches. The first one is certain key, where the credentials are generated by ZDM, meaning that the ZDM creates a device certificate and store it somewhere, but also creates a private key, does not store it, and send it to and put it in some way into the device. Now the device can authenticate itself, okay? Because each time you use TLS with the device certificate, you are creating, sending an authentication message to the server, proving that in that precise moment, you know the private key. With a JWT, you only prove that somewhere in the past, you knew that secret, but not now. You are not proving that you know the private key now. With the certificate, and thanks to the TLS connection, now you can prove that in this precise moment, I know the private key and I know how to use it. And so I switch from authenticity, as in the token approach, with authentication, as in the certification approach, in the certification and key approach. Obviously, you need a full TLS stack on the device, and you can have now two-way authentication, because the device can trust the server and the server can trust the device via PKI, not via tokens. Okay, this level of trust is way higher than the one of the tokens. Certificate can be renewed and revoked. Okay, so you don't have the problems that you have with the tokens before. And you don't need the user the password for the MQTT, because the TLS connection itself gives you the credentials. It contains enough credentials and enough proofs for our server to identify the device. I don't need a password. I don't need a token. The certificate that you have is enough to identify yourself. What is the security flaw of this approach is that the private key is generated outside the device. So somewhere here in the ZDM creates private key, something bad can happen. Probably this key is in a file, this file can be stolen, this file can be residing on our disk and whatever. So it's not very safe, but it's safe enough. Okay, if you trust the place where you generate and store this private key before putting it into the device and deleting it forever, then it's a good model. Another model, better model, is this one where the private key is generated on board of the device and not like here by the ZDM servers. And this is the same as how you request a digit certificate from a website. The device generates the private key, generate a CSR from the private key saying I am device named whatever, and I want a client certificate from you. ZDM generates a client certificate from the CSR, signing it with the ZDM certification authority, which, to confuse the things more and more, can be different from the certificate authority, from the self-signed certification authority that the ZDM uses to generate the MQTT broker certificate. They can be separate, and they will be separate. One is for controlling the devices, the authentication of the devices, and one is for controlling the authentication of the MQTT endpoint. This is very good stuff, and it's like before. There is two-way authentication. Certificates can be renewed. You can do whatever you want, and the private key never leaves the device. What is the security flaw? Probably you have to have take care of how you store the private key, because if you store it in the firmware, or if you store it in clear, or if you store it in the flash, and you don't disable JTAG, everyone can take your device, connect it to a JTAG, and find the private key. So you have to get very careful on how you do this stuff. How you do this stuff usually is with secure elements that can store this private key, that can generate the CSR, and so allows you to be more safe, but just on the device level, on the topic of storing and handling secrets, not on the TLS stuff. Last one is external certification authority. If for the reason that I said before, if I want certification root, a root CA, a custom root CA, if a customer is so big that he has his own HSM, or he wants to use the HSM from DZ-Shirt or whatever, we can configure the Zen Device Manager in order to recognize all the devices that are doing a TLS connection to our endpoint using certificates signed by not the ZDM, but the customer CA. For this to work, all we need to do is for the customer to give us the customer CA. This is not secret material, this is public material, so they can give it to us. We put it in our trusted anchor, and every time a device connects to us, we can verify its own certificate because it's signed by the customer CA. Moreover, if we add some metadata to the customer CA, we can also put the device directly into the workspace, onto the fleet that we need, that is the one automatically chosen by the customer CA when he uploads this thing. Why this is important? This is important because security can be done in many different levels. So the customer must be in control of what happens. And also because the certificate renewal and revocation is now something that the customer does and not the ZDM, okay? Using OCSP and CRL and whatever. The ZDM will ask the certification authority of the customer if the client the certificate is still valid. If not, it will not accept the certification. But renewal and revocation is now handled by the customer. The other stuff, the other important properties of this approach, which is the best one, is that the customer is not linked to our security system. Okay, if for whatever reasons they want to after a while use no more the Zerynth Device Manager public cloud, but they want an on-premise installation, we just install the on-premise for the customer, and the certificates are owned by the customer. Okay, they don't need on-premises our certification authority with our private key. They don't need our MQTT broker with our private key. Okay, they just create keys for themselves, do a firmware update or a configuration update of the devices, changing the endpoint, and every device will happily connect to the on-premises version of the ZDM. Okay, they are the owner of their own devices because they own the root certification authority and the server certification and the server certificate of the MQTT endpoint. Okay, this is important. No one, I don't know, think about Whirlpool. If Whirlpool will ever use our Zerynth Device Manager, they will ask for this kind of security. They would not want us to manage their certificate. Okay, but we can easily do this thing thanks to how PKI works, how server name indication works, and how all the stuff that we see up to now work. So we didn't invent anything. We exploit the features of the PKI to obtain our features. I hope, and I think this is the last. We reached the end. Ooh.
I have a quick question.
Go, everyone is hating you.
Yes. But for the last three device authentication model, the certain key, the CSR and XCA, the step optional are not optional.
Are not optional, are required.
Are required because we are authenticating both the client and the server. So because in the TL.
Yeah, we are using the private key of the device in the authentication, in the ACDSA step, in the authentication step of the TLS as credential. So we need the certificate of the device to verify and trust the private key.
Okay.
Everyone else is dead.
We can also disable.
Still there. We can also
disable this optional step of the TLS in future if we would not we want not to authenticate the device, but for our purpose, it is important to authenticate the device.
Yeah, I think that what we'll do is something like this, We will use SNI, okay, so that our load balancer can decide what to do based on the endpoint. If you want to authenticate with this stuff here, we will probably use customer name, MQTT CDM. If you want this certain key or whatever, we use another endpoint. And if you want less security, you use another endpoint. But this way, you have just one entry point, and then you decide which certificate and which options of TLS requiring from the server.
Okay.
Oh my God, I'm tired. 3 hours. Well, I think it's enough. So, questions? No. Okay. Well, I declare the thing finished.